Well, welcome everyone to this session of Administrator Issues and Updates on April 8th, 2025. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Roll call. Commissioner Savas.
Present.
Commissioner West.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Chair Roberts.
Here. All right. Thank you, Gary. Would you please introduce the first agenda item for us?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. First up today is our independent auditor presentation of the fiscal year 2023-2024 audited financial statements for Clackamas County. To present is Elizabeth Comfort, our finance director, and Ashley Austin from Moss Adams, who's our contractor that did the audit. Go ahead, please.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. Chair Roberts, thank you for having me this morning. I'm here to go over the 2024 audit results. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide. So I'll walk through our key service team members and then walk through high-level questions and answers that we believe you as commissioners would want the answers to about the audit process, and then a high-level overview of our required communications with those charged with governance, which we did have with the audit committee a couple of weeks ago now. If you go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is your key service team members. I served as your engagement reviewer, overall partner that led the engagement. You'll see my personal signature on your audit reports in compliance with Oregon minimum standards. Amanda McCleary Moore is a partner in our Medford location and served as the concurring partner. She looks at the financial statements, a few things in our file. And then Kevin Muller-Liley is a senior manager and served as a delegated engagement reviewer. If you go ahead to the next slide. So the first question is, what does an audit of the county entail? So first, it's that independent verification of transactions and account balances. So we look at source documentation, capital assets, accounts receivables, revenues. We're looking at invoices. We're looking at cash payments. We're looking at bank statements. We're also verifying balances with third parties. So those investments that are held, cash balances, long-term debt, those are all confirmed with your third-party institutions. We also perform an analytical review over certain balances and transactions such as revenue, expenses. We set independent expectations and ask further questions if balances don't meet our expectations. And then finally, substantive testing procedures. So those are the show me portion, again, looking at invoices, tying to bank statements, et cetera. We also evaluate the effectiveness of internal controls. So we do review key controls that are important to significant transaction cycles, those that, if they failed, that would cause a material misstatement. We test some of those controls for operational effectiveness and then report any control weaknesses that we identify as part of that process. The third item on the slide is testing compliance with federal and state laws. So of course, with Oregon minimum audit standards, we are required to test the adoption of the budget, certain procurement items, as well as a few other miscellaneous items. And then we do perform the federal audit over your federal funds that you receive and spend throughout the year in compliance with uniform guidance. If you go to the next slide. The fourth area under this question number one is that technical review of the financial statements. So the county does apply for and has received the GFOA Certificate of Excellence Award for the last 30 plus years, I think. So we are looking for at those financial statements for the technical requirements in accordance with GAAP, but also in accordance with the GFOA so that they can continue to meet that requirement. We also look to make sure that when we're reviewing those financial statements, that those balances that we audited tie to what's reported in the audited financial statements, and that supplementary information, mostly the budget actual information, is presented accurately. And finally, we report the audit results. So we do meet with finance staff throughout the audit process. We had an exit meeting with the audit committee a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, and then we also report now to you, the county commissioners. If you go to the next slide. So question number two is, are the financial statements accurate? So our procedures are, we perform a risk assessment over the county as a whole, identify any significant risk areas that we need to focus on. We also meet with a variety of individuals throughout the organization to help inform that risk assessment, including county commissioners. We test internal controls for effectiveness. We perform that substantive testing and perform that technical review of the financial statements. And so what are the results? A clean opinion. Your financial statements are prepared in accordance with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. That's what you want to hear. Highest level of assurance that you can receive, an unmodified opinion, clean opinion. If you go to the next slide. So did the county comply with applicable federal and state laws and regulations? So again, we're also performing a risk assessment over the direct and material compliance requirements, both from the Oregon minimum standards perspective as well as the uniform guidance federal audit compliance perspective. We perform compliance testing over federal grants and several state laws that, of course, like I mentioned, covered budget and procurement, public contracting. First, our report on the Oregon minimum standards resulted in no control findings and no compliance findings. So that is a clean opinion and what you want to hear. The second opinion that's listed under the results section of this slide is over federal grants. And we did have 3 significant deficiencies that we identified during our audit procedures over the federal grants and 3 instances of noncompliance. And I'll walk through those here quickly right now. So the first was, if you go to the back of slide, thank you. We tested 3 major programs. So the entitlement grants cluster, home investments program, and the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. Those were the 3 buckets of funding that we tested all the direct and material compliance requirements that are required by the OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. The first significant deficiency we identified was under the entitlement grants cluster. You are required to file a federal transparency form whenever you provide additional funding more than $30,000 to a subrecipient in any given year. We noticed that you had several subrecipients during the year in that program, but only one where the award was issued in fiscal 24. We checked to see if the form had been filed. In fiscal 24, it had not. So since there was one form that needed to be filed and it wasn't, that's automatically an instance of noncompliance and a significant deficiency. We also tested another cash on hand report where you file 4 of those reports throughout the year quarterly. We tested 2 of the 4 were late. So that resulted in a significant deficiency over reporting for that entitlement grants cluster. We also had 2 deficiencies in the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. The first was over procurement. So there were 39 vendors that were paid more than $25,000. We tested 4 of those vendors, 2 of which you're required to, when you contract with a vendor using federal funds, you're required to go out to a website called sam.gov and look to see, is that vendor suspended or debarred? Because you can't contract with a vendor that's suspended or debarred using federal funds. The county did say that they did that. Unfortunately, there was no evidence that that had been done. So recommendation to retain the evidence whenever you go out to that website and check to make sure that the vendor is not suspended or debarred. Also with those 2 vendors, you are required to have some federal contract language in there that essentially asks the vendor to certify that they are not suspended or debarred in accordance with the 2 CFR, which is uniform guidance. Unfortunately, the contract language was not included in either one of those contracts as well, which resulted in a significant deficiency instance of noncompliance. The third significant deficiency was also in the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery fund on allowable costs. We tested 35 items. 9 of the 35 items were related to an outside contractor. You used Robert Half. We looked at the timesheets for 9 of these contracted employees. They can code their time appropriately. There were various lines that were available for COVID-related activities, vaccinations, and other things that you would think of related to COVID. Unfortunately, one of the items that was on that timesheet was also related to the ballot 108 measure. And the time that was recorded to the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds grant was related to the ballot 108 measure, which that's not allowable under that grant. So that became a significant deficiency and an instance of noncompliance as well. Recommendation there to really just review when you're moving funds over, if grants are going to cover certain funds, that you're really scraping the detail to ensure that anything that is being recorded as a federal expenditure is allowable.
If I may add, so each of these 3 instances that Ashley's describing are in detail in the audit report for our federal grants. So I apologize that those are not included in your packet today, but they are included in the final pages of that audit, which I'll resend out if you'd like.
Management's response is also included in there as the corrective action plan. If you go to the question number 4, did the audit identify any fraud, waste, or abuse? As I mentioned, we do evaluate key controls. We brainstorm independently as an engagement team without management present about where the risks might lie. We also interview individuals throughout the county. As I mentioned, our testing uncovered no reportable matters of fraud, waste, or abuse during the audit. In the next slide, if you go 2 slides down, we did meet with the audit committee, as I mentioned, and had an in-depth discussion including all of our required communications with the audit committee. This says in August. Unfortunately, that was incorrect. It was in March. Maybe it was in April. I'm sorry. The dates really get past me these days. It was in April. Sorry for the error there. Just a few high-level items that I think you as the commissioners would like to know. So the audit adjustments, those are items that the county would have to record in order to receive a clean opinion. No corrected audit adjustments were identified. You will see that we did identify one uncorrected audit adjustment, which was to reduce accounts receivable by about $2.6 million in revenue. The way that uncorrected audit adjustment came about, we receive an aging from management of all the accounts receivable outstanding. This was in H3S. We look at that population. It was about $20 million. We pick the largest items and make sure that they have an invoice, the cash is collected, so it exists, it's valued appropriately at the end of the year, and then we sample on the remaining items. We sampled approximately 7 items, and of those 7 items, one of them resulted in this error. So $40,000 item, we asked management about it. It was related to an invoice that was dated back 12/31/2021 that actually had never been sent to the state of Oregon, so it was not a valid receivable. Too late to send it at this point when it was identified. So the options were for management to go back and really do a detailed analysis of the receivable aging to identify other items that were errors and correct them, or the way the auditors deal with these types of errors is we project the error over the entire population, which is what resulted in this $2.6 million adjustment, which is it's really kind of a theoretical adjustment almost, but it does take into account the fact that there was an error that we identified during our audit procedures. No other uncorrected audit adjustments were identified, and we believe, and management also believes, that it's immaterial to the county's financial statements as a whole, which is why it's living as a past adjustment. Also, no difficulties encountered during our audit procedures and no disagreements with management. It was a smooth audit process. We really enjoy working with management, and happy to take any of your questions at this time.
Great. We had a conversation just about this accounts receivable error, and I'm trying to get my kind of arms around it, and and maybe you can talk just a little bit more about your calculation at coming up with what you're saying is can be a loss or not, or an error at that 2.6 million. So, and then Elizabeth, maybe you can talk about some of the things that you'd mentioned this morning, that some things that have changed, and kind of enlighten us where that are at.
Yeah, so auditors, we have an audit methodology that we follow, which follows our risk assessment process, and that process really dictates how many items we sample, how many items we direct test, how much of the population we cover, which is why when we sampled those 7 items and $40,000 out of the total sampled population, we essentially take a percentage of that and apply it to the 20.2 million and say, well, there's probably additional errors in this population. This probably isn't the only one that's sitting in here. So what might it be? I think had management gone back through the population to determine what the errors were, if there were any, it would likely have been less than this 2.6 million. But as a result of the fact that this item was identified during the audit process, which is pretty intensive. Management's providing a lot of documentation to us, focused on other items. The time to review the aging really wasn't during the audit process. It should have been done previous to when we had received the AR aging. I don't know if you want to provide some.
Elizabeth Comfort, Finance Director. So yes, since this time period of December 21st or 21 of this invoice, we have implemented our accounts receivable module in our software of record, PeopleSoft, and this is to help us track our accounts receivable, know what has been sent out, know what is aging, and we are in the process of going through all these unaccounted for or past invoices prior to the implementation in '23 of the software. So we have implemented the system to correct this not to continue.
Great. Commissioner Savis has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. One of your statements you made earlier was about, auditing or looking at our financial statements for making sure they're accurate. And, financial forecasts are kind of a prospective financial statement. Do you audit those as well?
No.
Okay. It's correct, they're a prospective financial statement nonetheless, correct?
A forecast? Yes.
Yeah. So my question is, maybe this is more for Elizabeth, but because of the obligations with the courthouse behind us, we are now following our forecast closely more than ever, right? And the public in general, I have found, in my 25 years of elected experience, is that they really think that an audit or a clean audit or an audit with, minor little things is, a more detailed audit than they really realize. And I know I've learned that you can actually have a government agency that is losing $2 or $3 million a year or more, and yet have a clean financial audit. So that's a reality. So along that line, I guess, for ourselves and boards in the future to come, I look back on that, was it when did you start, Elizabeth? What year did you start here?
2020.
Yeah, 2020. So in the budget cycle, just before you got here, Elizabeth, we had a financial forecast, and it was deemed, I deemed it, that it was off by $10 million plus, right? And the audit did not pick that up, right? So, and it turned out to be $13 million, not 10, but I was just rounding numbers and came up with at least $10 million off. And everyone on the board was in disagreement with that at the time. Turned out that it was accurate nonetheless. My point is, what level of audit could we do to ensure something like that doesn't happen, knowing that the obligation of the courthouse, and as tight and constrained as our budget is going to be for 30 years, I think the forecasting is really, really important. But how do we, what type of audit or what kind of mechanism could we put in place to make sure that's as accurate as possible?
You could engage a performance auditor to take a look at the forecast and audit it against assumptions that the
Okay.
county is making. Financial statement auditors can also look at forecasts. We've done that when private entity clients, not government clients, would be my only experience when they're going out for a large piece of debt and they need a forecasted piece of information, forecasted financial information to include in a filing, an offering statement. But you could engage Moss Adams to perform an audit of the forecast.
What frequency would you suggest that be done?
No more than annually.
I'm sorry?
No more than annually.
Okay, so you would even suggest even annually, okay.
And if I may add, Commissioner, so each year, as we have our audited financials, those are placed into the forecast, so we always know we're starting with true numbers, because they're always budgets or estimates, projections. And then once we have the audited financials, that's our new baseline. And so then our forecast starts from that. So we're always trying to true to the best known financials that we have.
No, and Elizabeth, I just want to make sure that everyone has more confidence in our financial structure today in your office today than we did back then. So I know we've done a lot of changes and we're still trying to get things, chart of, all of that. So I really appreciate the work. I know we're making improvements all the time, and continuous improvement is something I put a lot of stock in. So that's what I'm looking out for, because I was telling Ben earlier, I'm not going to be here 10, 15, 20 years from now or 30 years from now. And someone needs to make sure that we're following that forecast and as accurate as possible. And I know it's based on assumptions, and that's
Right.
hard to do.
Yeah, my only experience with that was very intense, and it was a lot of work, and it was very expensive. So we would need to work with you, the county, if that was something that was of interest, to really dial in the procedures there.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Commissioner West?
You mentioned regarding the substantive or significant deficiencies that you found related to COVID monies in the federal government. You did say that there's supposed to be a check to make sure that basically a bad actor doesn't slip through and receive federal funding. That step was missed here in our county. Can you clarify that though that step was missed, no bad actors were given money?
Yeah, I can confirm that. The vendors that were provided money, we did do an independent check on our own, and
Okay, and
they
you-
were not.
retroactively, right? And do we
Correct.
know why? Is it just like we said we did it, but we had no proof, or do we know why was that? And that's an important step. Why was that missed?
Well, Elizabeth can speak for management, but my understanding is that they just didn't print it out.
Okay, and there's it doesn't hold in a system once you do it.
No.
No.
No,
Okay.
it's an outside system, beta.gov, sam.gov, and you would type in the vendor, you would say, and it would say not suspended or debarred, or no vendor found is
Okay.
what you would find. And you would print that, and you would file it in the procurement file.
Okay. So potential risk we found out. We'll print them out going forward. Okay. Is that
I think the risk is also higher in the COVID money because some governments only have procurement rules around federal funding, and the COVID money just touched all departments.
Yeah.
And so I think this isn't necessarily
a systemic issue?
right.
Okay. The other question you talked about perked my interest a little bit. Measure 108 had to do with like sin tax, tobacco sin tax, right?
Yeah.
So it was a tax on, when was that measure? It was recently, right? Like 2020. Anyways, we had it ballot measure 108. I remember it being, it's like a sin tax. And you were like, this is not an appropriate. So were we giving money towards like promoting us? Like what
No,
was
no,
that? Could you explain that?
The way that I saw it is it was a timesheet of an individual that had been a contracted employee through Robert Half.
Okay.
They had a timesheet, various items on that timesheet that they could record their time to, one of them being ballot 108 measure. I don't know what's included in there, but what we needed to see was that they had coded their time to COVID-19 activities, vaccination, contact tracing, things like
All
that.
those things. But did they get paid COVID-19 money to work on a ballot measure?
Well, they got paid money, and that money ended up getting coded under this COVID grant, yes.
I don't know, that looks kind of suspect to me that you're doing a political activity and getting COVID-19 money.
Which is why it's unallowable and which is why it's called out.
Okay. So how is that fixed? Like how did that happen, or how did that fall through?
My understanding is that those dollars got transferred late in the game, probably because there was COVID money left over.
Okay.
And there wasn't a sufficient review of the information that backed up those expenses to really inform the individual that was transferring.
Is that money clawed back? I mean, to me, it's like a big deal when you are given neutral taxpayer dollars to promote a specific political activity. That's a pretty hard line it's not a gray area there for me. So I'm just questioning you because it makes me have a lot of skepticism about, did we claw that money back and say this is completely not allowable? Like I just understand how it fell through the cracks that we're paying for somebody, it looks like, to work on a specific political ballot measure through COVID money. Makes me feel like that's a significant misuse of those funds.
Okay, well, I agree that it's unallowable. I would also like to point out that there were no question costs included in the significant deficiency. We are required to report anything that's over $25,000.
Okay.
So the total of the funds that were paid to this contracted employer or contracted employee related to this ballot 108 measure was less than $25,000. So it did not require reporting in the significant deficiency. We didn't think that it was so systemic throughout the funding that it was reported as a material weakness. It's reported as a significant deficiency. So while I do agree that it's unallowable and that there needs to be more review of the information that's being coded to that grant, I'd offer you those additional details as well.
So can I interpret that, that you don't believe that there's other, it could, I guess I'll say that, are there other instances potentially where we're using, these government funds to promote political activity specifically? Or is this a risk here that this is a tip of an iceberg type of thing? Like, should we, yeah.
I personally don't think that that is a significant risk.
Okay.
But obviously we did find that there was some activity related to that, but it was pretty small dollars.
Okay, it just is a super bright line, just
Yes.
principally even,
Yes.
to me, like, I think it underroads trust within the process and within government, local government, so, yeah. That's all my questions. I don't know if you had a response, Elizabeth, but.
I did speak with the department, and so this was administrative work, and it was not intended for this, so.
Okay.
This was an error and should not have been coded to this.
Okay.
But the correction was not identified prior to the audit, so.
Okay.
The department is aware, and it was not intended to be used for this.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple other quick questions. And I hear you talking about significant deficiencies, and you also kind of quantify some numbers with that. Could you just explain that to the board for us, kind of how you kind of weigh those?
Sure. So auditors are required to report items that are significant, a significant deficiency, or a material weakness. In our judgment, a material weakness is anything where it could materially impact the program. In the financial statements, a material weakness would be identified by a material journal entry. So something that was identified that was over our judgmentally determined materiality threshold in any fund or at the county taken as a whole, that would be a material weakness. There's some control that slipped through the cracks that allowed that journal entry to get posted, and it resulted in an error. On the federal funds side, we're looking to see, is this item that we've identified material to the compliance requirement? So in this particular instance, allowable costs. Are there question costs associated with the item that we're testing? So are there costs that we've identified that should not have been recorded to that grant? If those are above $25,000, then we have a material weakness to report typically. The difference between a significant deficiency and a material weakness is often judgmentally determined by us as auditors. Because the amount was less than $25,000 and relatively immaterial, we did determine that it was a significant deficiency. But if it's going to materially impact your compliance with the program, then it would be reported as a material weakness. I don't know if that really answered your question. It's very judgmental.
Yeah. The only other question I had, and Commissioner Savas brought it up at your more detailed briefing that we were at, is there was a question about has the sheriff's office kind of met those compliances? And you talked about that earlier, just wanted the rest of the board to kind of know.
Yeah, so the county engaged Moss Adams to perform a performance audit. This was back in fiscal '23, I'm pretty sure. And I wasn't involved with that performance audit. The performance audit is completely separate from the financial statement audit. We are not required under our professional standards to follow up on the recommendations that were provided to the county through that performance audit. If you would like to know if you have followed up on those particular items that we recommended, then you would need to talk to the individual that signed that report. I'm happy to facilitate that and coordinate that communication, but that, as a financial statement auditor, informs our risk assessment about the county. We read the report, we include it in our file because it's another procedure or another engagement that we are providing to the county, but we certainly don't follow up on those recommendations.
Okay. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so Gary, I think in a follow-up with you on this topic, you mentioned that it's scheduled to be reported back to the Budget Committee. So my question is, if that's true, is it during a quarterly Budget Committee meeting, or will it be actually during the Budget Committee meeting that we have for our week-long exercise of
It'll be the
budgeting?
May Budget Committee week meeting.
Okay, okay. So we will have that more detailed report, I guess. Not necessarily from Moss Adams, correct? Or will it be?
Moss Adams is done. They just prepared a report. There's no further work you asked them to do.
Okay.
It's internal now with my office, the Finance Department, and the Sheriff's Office.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. I just think at the other, excuse me, at our meeting the other day, I thought it was, they had met those performance measures or expectations. And so that's not your understanding.
Well, I can't speak to whether they have or whether they have not. That is not something that we have followed up on as your financial statement auditors.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you both very much. We sure appreciate it. All right, Gary, what's up next?
Thank you. Next, legislative update, state transportation package. Update. Tonya Holowetsky, Director of Public and Government Affairs, and Trent Wilson, Government Affairs Manager, will give you an update. There was a memo in your packet as well. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. We're here this morning for an informational update only and to provide a briefing on the framework for the recently released proposed transportation funding package at the state legislature. So for background, the Joint Committee on Transportation released the framework for the Oregon Transportation Reinvestment Package, or TRIP. And this information is a starting point for a bill that has yet to be published. So the details of the TRIP are attached in your packet. I'm not going to go over all of the details, but I did want to cover just a few high-level recommendations that are relevant to Clackamas County. So there is an expectation to increase funding for operations and maintenance. This increased funding could bring about 20 to 25 million to Clackamas County per year for road uses. There is a proposal to phase in road user charge. These funds would go to the State Highway Fund. There is also a proposal to implement a system use fee for vehicle purchases. Some of these funds will be dedicated to committed projects, such as the Rose Quarter and the I-205 Abernathy Bridge, and other projects that were named in HB 2017. And finally, there is a proposal to invest more into the Transit and State Transportation Improvement Fund, or STIF. So those are the high level. There is a lot more information in the attachment. We really want to, open this up for questions. And then Trent will be here to answer any of the questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Savas, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm not going to claim that I am fully aware and fully understand all the moving pieces of this. I'm not sure anyone does. And it's a framework on which, we expect changes and adjustments to be made at the state legislative level. So with that, I, have had some discussions and have some understandings and actually have questions, really, not for staff here, but, how, certainly there's a lot of money being collected, but how it is actually programmed in all these different streams, funding streams, is some questions I have. But I think what's really relevant to this board, not necessarily for a decision today, but just to make you aware of, and I'll just ask staff here to expand on it. We have two priority transportation goals here we've had for a long time, Sunrise and I-205. And what has happened is that as legislators come and go, not unlike any other elected official, mayors and city councilors and county commissioners come and go, not that many people around in 2017 are still around today. Some are, but not as many. And therefore, the definition of what the I-205 project is, I think, a little bit mischaracterized often at the state level. And so, one would think when they say the Abernathy project, it's the Abernathy project and not necessarily the 205 project. On the other hand, in this package, it says the I-205 project will be completed. Well, it's not the I-205 project that was approved in 2017. It's only just the bridge, which is the Abernathy Bridge. So could you just expand? I mean, there's not a path towards actually in here proposed as of yet, and maybe not at all. I don't know, not to predict the future, but there is no means in which the funding is spelled out to complete the lanes and the bottleneck along I-205. And because that's a high priority for the board, I thought that maybe staff, and I know that Trent's, going to speak to that a little bit here today, but just to make you aware, there's no identified funding for those lanes. They have identified funding to complete the bridge aspect of it, and that is all. So can you enlighten us any more, Trent? I know this is dynamic. I don't expect any big changes or news for weeks to come, actually. But I think that's just the most important thing to at least inform the board so they can ponder our next moves, if any.
Thank you, Commissioner. The road for advancing the I-205 project in Clackamas County has been a long one. I don't want to do too much history here, just for the sake of time, but it is important to know that in House Bill 2017, they named 3 primary bottleneck projects, including the I-205 project. It was called the I-205 Improvements Project. It included the Abernathy Bridge and from the Abernathy Bridge all the way to Stafford Road. So Commissioner Savas is correct. In 2017, the whole 6-mile, 7-mile stretch was included. That is the bottleneck. That is where it goes from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. That's why it was a bottleneck priority project. And that was heard across the state, not just a priority of Clackamas County. That was a governor priority at the time, and it was a project of national and statewide significance. So it has a lot of merit for improving that particular project. However, only $10 million was dedicated to it in House Bill 2017. For initial planning and design startups, and then there was a budget note in House Bill 2017 that said if congestion pricing were to proceed, I think it was called value pricing at the time, if value pricing were to proceed, then some of that money should be used to pay for I-205. That is Clackamas County's interpretation of that bill. Others, like ODOT and some legislators, feel like the House Bill 2017 said tolling should pay for I-205. So just, 2 sides of a coin that we've been talking about for many years now. In 2021, House Bill 3055 came along. It created an opportunity to move a penny that was dedicated to the Rose Quarter over to the I-205 project so that construction could get started because the I-205 project was readier than Rose Quarter. Rose Quarter was not ready at the time, but they had this penny sitting there to advance funding. So that's how they were able to start the Abernathy Bridge project. So it's now under construction. That's good news because that is a necessary project to have a seismically resilient I-205. I think this board has always agreed with that. But in order to do that, they had to phase out the I-205 project. Phase 1 is the Abernathy Bridge. Phase 2 are the lanes, if we wanted to simplify it in that way. So that created, that separation that Commissioner Savas is talking about, and a focus by legislators in the region to really hone in on the seismic resiliency of that important bridge. And at the same time, there has been a strong opposition in parts of our state and the region to having no new lanes, and I would say I-205 has been caught in the headwinds of some of those things, so that's created some of the conditions. Since no initial funding was dedicated to I-205, and since many legislators and ODOT have felt like tolling was going to pay for I-205, no new revenue was really given to the I-205 project between 2017 and now. However, when tolling, for lack of a better phrase, was shelved by the governor last year, there was a project that cost over $500 to $800 million that's in Clackamas County that ODOT and the OTC needed to find a way to fund because they were already under construction. And so in December, the OTC decided to bond that project with their remaining bond funds, which is about $500 million in bonding that, if I've heard this correctly, put ODOT in a spot where they've reached their debt ceiling. They're not really able to bond anymore beyond that. And it's a debt obligation of roughly $84 million a year that ODOT has just for the I-205 project. So when we say in here, like, what are the projects that the legislature has committed to from 2017 is those projects that have dedicated funding or dedicated construction starts. So they look at the Abernathy Bridge as a project they've committed to because they've started construction on it, and they want to relieve that debt obligation so that ODOT can do many more small projects. That is why the I-205 Abernathy Bridge is called out in here as something to try to fund as a capital project. Trent's perspective here, as your government affairs person, is that that is $500 million named here that is not collected through tolls for the Abernathy Bridge. And so in some ways, that is a big win for Clackamas County, that they are looking to obligate not toll dollars to advance and find some way to fund the Abernathy Bridge. That is only part of the project that is important to this board. So that is the flavor that I would add to the comments that Commissioner Savas made. I know that was a long explanation, but there's just there's a lot of history here.
Thanks, Trent. I'm glad it was you that spelled out all that detail and not me.
Thanks, Trent.
Hope I did it well.
Commissioner West has a question.
This is a complicated sticky wicket, isn't it? There's a lot, like Commissioner Saba says, there's still a lot of moving stuff happening within this transportation package. For those at home watching through this riveting conversation regarding legislation and transportation, for the day watchers we have, right now this is a projected $1.9 billion per biennium tax increase to Oregonians. Is that correct?
I would say that's at a minimum.
At a minimum. Things that you may not know, public, is that includes a 20% a gallon increase on your fuel. That hurts working families and fixed incomes the most, who have to rely just to get to work. And we don't have another choice in Clackamas County except to use 205 in some of these roads. So that's a tax on working families. An increase on your registration fee. We know what that that landed like a lead brick here in Clackamas County when we increased our registration fee. So, but the state wants to do another $66. Increase your title cost by $90. A weight mile tax of almost 17%. We can keep going here. There's many more. We have, they're going to start doing, just to have the ability to purchase a vehicle, you'll basically, I don't know if it's like a sales tax on just cars. So congratulations, you have a new car so that you can exist in society today, because we don't have a lot of mass transit options in Clackamas County. You get to pay an income, you get to pay a tax. There's a tire tax, because let's bring in all the goodies because we can afford it in Oregon, I guess. So your tire tax, is it going to pay for more roads or go towards essential transportation? So no, it is not. It is not going to go towards those things. It's going to go towards rail options, because we're taking trains everywhere, I guess, still, like it's the 1930s or something. 25% will go toward wildlife crossings. I hope all the animals know how to use specific crossings that we may spend a lot of tax dollars on, but this lacks some common sense. And salmon restoration. I want to make sure that we have great salmon habitat, but I don't know if this is the right way to go about it in a time frame where we are about to go into an urban doom loop because of the amount of taxes and businesses are looking to move to other places. Population is fleeing. We're probably going to lose in the next census a congressional seat and lose political power in this state and representation. And people are fleeing to Clark County, Idaho, Tennessee, Florida, Texas. But we're seeing population in Portland decline because of policies like this. And population's declining so fast and so hard in Portland that it's no longer one of the most 25 populated cities in the entire country. And by polling, the electorate is like, oh my God, stop taxing us. But I would like to know, after that opining that I just did, what is ODOT bringing to the table to help make this right? I mean, they sound like a kid with a credit card that just hit their credit card limit and they want daddy to keep paying it off. But I don't know where the money's gone, the billions that have already gone, and they want at least $2 billion more. Has there been any reasonable proposal by ODOT to say, hey, let's look at what we have, where we've been and where we've been going and where that money has gone, and take a critical eye to that? Has there been any proposal of any cuts, administrative adjustments from ODOT?
I don't work for ODOT, so I'll start there. So I want to be as kind to them as I can, because we do partner with them on a lot of things. They're in a tough spot, is my initial reaction here. They have been very vocal about their O&M, their operations and maintenance need, leading up to the 2025 legislative session. And you're right, they were using the number of $1.7 billion per year in need. What's proposed here is actually only a quarter of that, only gets them a quarter of what they were looking for in that need. So it's not even close to addressing what they said that they needed. There was some articles that came out about their budgeting in February that has created a heavy-handed conversation at the legislature, leading towards a lot of accountability pieces that are coming down the pike. The legislature is spending a lot of time looking into, like, what can ODOT cut? Where are their efficiencies? Why have you done things a certain way? So there are a lot of conversations at the legislature, and this package will include, when it is passed, maybe not these numbers, maybe they'll go up or down, but they will include a heavy-handed accountability approach, and that is mentioned in some of the parts in here too. So I can't speak to what those are yet. They are not out yet, and it will take a couple of months for the legislature to tidy those up, whatever those are going to be. What I would say, maybe in response to some of those pieces, is you are correct. It is a lot of money in an expensive time to live in Oregon, and I think that everybody in this room would agree with all of those things. And transportation is one of the most expensive things that we have to pay for as a public agency. You directed me, and the Association of Oregon Counties has also had the same direction, to protect this 50-30-20 formula, which is in the state highway fund, 50% goes to ODOT, 30% goes to counties, 20% goes to cities. So that whatever ODOT had skin in the game on, we would have skin in the game on. And at 30%, Clackamas County gets it, because we're so large, a healthy portion of that 30% that goes to counties statewide. So it's a lot of money, but it will allow your transportation department, if it were to pass like this, it would allow your transportation department to do more work, a lot more work. And so I want to put that on the table too. It's an expensive work. It's expensive work.
I totally appreciate this, but forgive me for being hyper skeptical of ODOT when they're asking for $2 billion more money for O&M. Really, right? Like O&M, it is hard to go and sell this to the voters and not feel a little bit like you're being fleeced.
If I may respond, I really appreciate that. And I think part of the context can also be the last two transportation packages in 2009 and 2017 were dominantly project packages. And that has historically been how the legislature has worked, and maybe this one too will to be determined, where those go build these 17 projects, go build those 14 projects, and they're cost this much money. That has pigeonholed a lot of ODOT's money, and so they have spent the last however many years that adds up to having a project-focused budget and not an O&M budget. And so this is kind of, from a way to look at this, is a rebalancing so that they are able to kind of keep up with those project-dedicated dollars and start to do some of the maintenance funding that has been shrunk over time as they've had more of a project portfolio, because they are budgeted by project-oriented votes, not by the work that is required for them to do in a mountain pass in Eastern Oregon, when we have a forest fire here and they're doing that remediate. There's a lot of that co-opted work that has been truncated as a result of getting the votes across the line. So the legislature's been very clear. They want to have an O&M budget so that we can all do O&M work.
Last question. Is it true that this significant tax increase on Oregonians requires a 2/3 vote out of the legislature?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Okay, and currently that 2/3 vote is not likely?
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Savas. Again.
Yeah, I just want to, one of the things that Trent mentioned was the accountability piece, and while the words were along the lines of maybe heavy-handed or something like that, I don't think we really know. I mean, I did catch on the news Co-Chair McLean stating that the whatever this process is will be done in 2 months. So it can't be that deep if it's only 2 months. But I don't know if there's more to the accountability going forward after that 2 months. So I don't know what it is. And I think we have to, be mindful in order for, what ODOT has come clean about in some of the mistakes that were made or errors or what presumptions and so forth. I think it's fair to say that they have made some admission that they've got some challenges. And the same token is, I don't think we can be blind to the fact that the cost of doing business for everyone and every business, private sector, public sector is going up. So I think both are true. There needs to be more accountability. There's been some errors, but at the same token there's also higher cost, and Trent's correct. They've been, I can tell you, I've talked to legislators that have said for years and years and years, they haven't had any new funding for O&M. It's been project-based, not O&M. So where they're farther and farther behind, not dissimilar to a water district or anyone else who deferred their maintenance. But nonetheless, you get farther behind and those costs are exorbitant. So I don't know what the real needs are and what the right medicine is, how it's programmed. But in order to get the trust, I think, I would like to better understand. And I know that Trent doesn't know the answer to this because we've already talked, but what that accountability is going forward in the next year or two to make sure that they can get the trust back of the public.
Thanks. I have to echo a few things that Ben has said. Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty significant increases in here, and Ben didn't even mention all of them. I mean, there's a road usage charge, corporate fee for fleet vehicles, increase in a payroll tax, actually even a tax for bicycles, And so I think Trent said it well, it's to be determined, more to come. I think what's really important, Trent and Tanya, I mean, if you can come back and really keep us updated on kind of how things are moving, because I think we should have a chance to have some more discussion about some of these really important issues that will, obviously impact the citizens of this county, and it is a very tough economic time. So I think we kind of all see that. But I want to say thank you for coming today, and if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. So thank you both.
Thank you.
All right.
So Gary, what's up next?
Thank you. Next is Advisory Board and Commission appointments. Andrew, go ahead.
The Traffic Safety Commission, staffed by the Department of Transportation and Development, currently has 4 to 6 openings due to term expirations. 10 to 12 total members are allowed with 4-year terms. Recruitment opened to the public in March of 2024 and again in May of 2024. Through this recruitment process, 7 applications were received and 3 are recommended for appointment. The recommendation is as follows: Michael Wilson to a 4th term ending 2028, Robert Biddle to a 1st term ending 2028, and Patricia Olson to a 1st term ending 2028. The board could select other candidates or require further recruitment, Mr. Chair.
Great. Any colleagues, any questions?
No questions, Chair. I move that we approve the slate. Michael Wilson to his 4th term, Robert Biddle to his 1st, and Patricia Olson to her 1st.
Great.
Second.
Right, so Commissioner Savas has moved to approve the appointment of Michael Wilson, Robert Brittle, Patricia Olson to the Traffic Safety Commission. Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, clerk. And Gary, what's next?
Next is Planning Commission. One of your advisory boards has vacancies, and this is one of the advisory boards you like to interview the applicants for before it comes to you for a final decision. There are 2 vacancies on the Planning Commission, and I'd like to ask which of any of you commissioners would like to interview the applicants for this advisory board.
When would that be, Gary?
We would make that work for your schedule, hopefully the next few weeks here in April.
Commissioner Savas, you have something?
Well, I think we should maintain that, and I wouldn't want to be alone, but there again, if there's 2 other commissioners that want to do it, I would yield, my interest in that, but I want to make sure that we do it, and there's 2 commissioners at least that are involved in that. It's a lot of work, and I want to just say, my thanks and gratitude to all the people, past and present, that are on the Planning Commission. It's one of our hardest working committees, so it's important, and I think it's important for us to be a part of that.
Right, thank you, Paul. Commissioner West?
I would like to necessarily, my plate is full. I know all of us are, there's 4 of us right now. I don't know where the appetite to take on this responsibility is practically with my colleagues. I'll echo what Commissioner Savas said. If duty calls, I'll step up, but I would prefer to defer to some of my other colleagues in this process.
Right. And Commissioner Schrader.
So I'll do it. I haven't done an interview in a long time, and I was very involved in land use back in the day. So we'll just work it out through my schedule then, Gary.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Schrader.
So Commissioner Schrader and Savas will be the two.
Craig, you're not interested?
I really kind of have to echo Ben right now. My plate is pretty full, and so if I could find some extra time, there's a number of issues just staying up on top of. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. I wouldn't want to be in your way if you wanted to do it.
I'm bowing down to let you take the lead on that. Thank you, Paul. So I think we have direction on it. Gary, what's next?
Great, thank you. Next, a commissioner appointment process update and timeline. There was a short memo in your packet. Here's the update. The applications close tomorrow, Wednesday, April 9th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, so one more day. You have 37 applicants so far. And again, one more day for people to apply. The tentative timeline is in your packet, your memo. I wanted to review it and ask if you're still okay with this timeline or if there's any adjustments you would like to see. So after Wednesday, April 9th, when the application period closes, our elected county clerk McMullen, her and her staff will review all the applications for eligibility. She's offered to do that, so she will do that the remainder of this week. On Monday, April 14th, we'll have the full resumes, cover letters, and applications available for you commissioners, printed. And here's what we're asking, that you have 3 days next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, to review all those applications. And then next Thursday, April 17th, during your business meeting, you'd have a public discussion on narrowing the candidates down to 3 to 5, your choice, or more if you wish. And then the following week, on Tuesday, April 22nd, we would schedule public interviews for the top candidates at that time, again, between 3 and 5, or however many you decide. We're suggesting a 45-minute public interview each, and you have that day free because that was your original retreat, which we've rescheduled. So we'll use that all day instead of work sessions from about 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Interview each candidate in around 45-minute blocks, available, open to the public. Public can watch it online or be in the room. And then Thursday, April 24th, during your business meeting, we would schedule a public discussion for you to potentially make the decision that day. Now, this is a truncated timeline only because starting April 25th, one of you will be away, and then one or two of you will be away for the following 3 weeks. And I do recommend, this is important, that all of you are physically present to conduct these interviews and make the decision. So unless you wish to change your travel schedule, commissioners, and you still want it to be in person, if you did not complete this by April 24th, we're looking into middle of May, which would elongate the timeline. So this is a proposed timeline. Wanted to get your feedback if this timeline works, if you'd like to make it longer or shorter, but any feedback you have is welcome. Thank you.
Great. Commissioner West.
Just a quick follow-up question, Gary, as you were giving that rundown and breaking everything down. Does that 37 applicants, is it to today? Because I know that we've been getting them weekly to review, and I'm through some of them. There's trying to give everybody the respect to read through every one of their applications, just because I respect the fact that they applied, and give it all fair and equal treatment. That's how I'm looking at it. I have my little binder and notes and everything. So my question is that to today, the 37, or do we have another chunk coming, and when should we expect that last chunk?
Right. You have 37 total applicants as of this morning.
Okay.
And Caroline from our staff, yes, she's been printing them out every week for you. So you probably have 35 already in your packets.
Okay.
There's only like 2 that came in since she printed the last packet.
Since she printed the last packet. So we have week 1, week 2, and a
Yes.
few more have come in that we haven't seen yet.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Discussion, thoughts? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Savas, go ahead.
Worries. So I'm not saying we got to, I don't want to use the words where we got to get this right, because we're still, we're making an appointment. We're not going to, I don't think there's really a right or a wrong, but in light of the controversy of the last commissioner who resigned, I think it's probably more obvious than ever, that perhaps we need to make sure wherever it fits in, that a background check is detailed and thorough enough. I want to emphasize that, thorough enough that we do everything we can. And I am kind of concerned that this is pretty fast tracking. I have deliberately, and have not looked at the applications. I will look at all of them when they're all in at the same time or same block. But I was also surprised to learn, I didn't really realize that 2-3 week period in which maybe we won't have a full board present. I think you're right, Gary, absolutely, that we all need to be physically present for the appointment. And I even think for the interviews as well. So I have no interest in kicking the can or extending it longer than, but I'm just kind of wondering if we could at least get to the interviews before that. What did you say, April 27th? Is that the date you said?
April 25th, you'll lose the.
April
all 4 year.
25th. So if we could at least get through, I'm actually for a little bit more deliberative period of time here, a little more time, suggesting, just one commissioner up here, that we at least do the public interviews before that date, and then make the selection, give time for thorough, background checks, and come back when we're all here to make the appointment, whatever that is. It's a different timeline, but I just think we're going a little bit too fast. I think 3 days for us to filter through all those applications thoroughly and do our own personal background and work and everything, I think that's just not enough time to do that well. And I want to make sure that whoever's in the final, whatever group it is that we've got, again, adequate time to do our homework individually as we all choose to do that. So, Chair, I yield back.
Commissioner West.
Gary, what does, we say background check. Now, there's all kinds of background checks. Like, I have a secret clearance within the Navy. I'm sure that's not the same background check that we're going to do, right? I mean, there's also, you go online and you put in it gives you back something. So what is appropriate? Are we going to ask for fingerprints?
what does that mean?
Chair Roberts, you're familiar with how this works as being a former sheriff, probably more than any of us. What are we going to be asking of the applicant? I don't understand. And what does that take?
Yes, we would do the typical background check we do for county employees. So this is not a super hyper secure background check like we do for the sheriff's office or people in secure facilities. It'd be the basic. It's not a fingerprint check, but basic. Look for any criminal records, any violation or infractions a person may have. It's less than 7 days that we would be able to conduct that.
Does it include bankruptcies? Does it include stuff that's public records within finances?
Yes, those type of public records type searches.
Does it look at misdemeanors, or is
Yes.
that not included?
That's included as well.
Okay, including a speeding ticket?
Yes.
Okay. Do we look at social media?
No.
We never scrub social media for anybody who works
If you
here?
asked me and staff to do that, we would do
Is that-
that separate from a
Is
background
that a
check.
separate type of process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how long do those take?
About a week,
You get a week for that.
which fits in the timeline I've offered. If you were to follow this suggestion, by Thursday, April 17th, you'd narrow down to a finalist list, and that would give us about 7 days to provide that back to you.
Do they have to sign a special form and fill out a
They
special?
already have in
background?
the application.
In the application. It doesn't give where have you lived
It
the
says
last
you
10 years?
consent to a background check.
Does that where have you lived the last 10 years? We need your addresses.
We're not specific on the application, but that's what a typical background check
Does?
implies.
Okay.
yeah.
And okay, cool. Thank you. I just didn't know. Thank you.
Any other comments, Martha?
Well, I understand where Paul's coming from. I will certainly be back by the middle of May to finish things up, so I don't know if you want to wait till the middle of May and just do it that way, or, it's up to the rest of you. I'm good with either timeline, but if we have one commissioner that wants to, Paul is always very thorough. I don't have an objection to that either.
All right. Commissioner West.
So you'd be back the second week of May, Commissioner
I'll
Schroeder?
be back by May 15th, yes.
Okay.
I'd be willing to, if we needed to leave it for that long I don't know what other additional background checks we'd have to do, but we'd have that time from the, I don't know if that's me or somebody else, quite frankly. Yeah, it is me, sorry about that.
Well, I think that,
Kind of looking at my dates here, but that would be, I don't know, it really depends on what the rest of you want to do. I have decided not to go to the WIR conference myself because I cannot, it's just a
Both.
lot. So I'm cutting, but I
Okay.
cannot cut the other things short.
Your family, yeah.
Yeah.
so I might just interject that I think that, Paul's got I think, a good valid point of just wanting to make sure we're all here. So I think the question is, can we get this done, the interviews done? And Paul, you're kind of suggesting getting the public interviews done by the 22nd and perhaps waiting until Martha gets back. Is that what I kind of hear you saying?
Well, whoops, I lost my page. What I was, the 3-day, for example, the 3-day period, starting we get the application screened on Monday of next week, right? I thought that 3 days was too compressed for us to do our own homework, right? Our initial homework to scrub, to figure out who we're gonna recommend in a block of folks for that. So I thought that was too compressed. And I also thought, again, to Ben's question, the background check piece, that, we have been, I think, experienced that sometimes social media post can come back and haunt someone, right? And we have found that obviously even maybe indiscretions that maybe weren't even, crimes, but, I don't think we can find everything. I don't think there's any I don't have any expectation that we're gonna find, everything or anything that we ought to be. But I just think I think the times and the situations we experienced in the last 5 years, I think warrants a little bit more thorough check. And I think it would be quite an embarrassment and a disservice to the public if we made an error and we didn't find something. So that, because of that, the last 5 years of stuff, I think I'm gonna work harder than I have before.
So are we saying the 15th would be the date? Martha, you back on that business meeting on the 15th?
I would think that it would probably more like the Friday. I mean, I'll be
Friday the
flying. I will
16th.
be in the air on the 15th, is what I'm saying.
You will be in the air?
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
So Gary, I'd turn it over to you and ask,
wanna do
hearing
this?
what Commissioner Salvis and West have said regarding perhaps expanding that background to include the items mentioned. You're responsible for the timeline, so what would you need to complete it?
So the background check takes approximately 1 week, and we would only do that for the finalists, not everyone.
it'd only be for 3 to 5
And we need to
people.
give time for the candidates to give them notice of an interview. And so I think that the timeline I presented is probably too short. And with respect, there's problems with you in May, your timeline. So Commissioner West, you leave immediately after Commissioner Schrader gets back. So then you're gone. So all 4 of you will be present the final week in May, and that's your budget week. So really, you're looking honestly at the first week in June. And I don't think you want to delay it that long.
Or the 16th of May?
The 16th of May.
That's a Friday.
Yeah, that's fine, so.
I mean, you could, we'd have to convene a special meeting of the board. Employees don't work that day. We can make it work, but that's not a normal work day. There'd be a lot of things we'd have to adjust to make that work if you chose to have a public meeting on a Friday, which we could do. But it'd be outside the norm.
Well, my suggestion would be this, and hopefully my colleagues will agree with me, is really kind of turning this over and delegating it to Gary to really find a date, give you the ability to expand the timeline to meet what we're asking, and then have him present that to us. Does that sound fair enough?
We could
Seeing
do it,
some
we could do
nods.
it the 19th if we want. Well, I don't know. Bill.
How about, let me work this offline. Let me work this offline and come up with a new proposed schedule for you, but I hear your feedback.
Okay.
So we'll incorporate that in the plan. But the key is the application deadline is still tomorrow, Wednesday, April 9th. So if anyone listening still wants to apply, there's a day and a half left. Wednesday, April 9th by 5 p.m. Pacific time.
See why that wouldn't
Please.
work.
All right.
More to come.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
What is next?
All right, next, review of your board business meeting for this Thursday, April 10th, 2025. There it is. You'll have a presentation proclaiming April as Grange Month in Clackamas County. You'll have 2 public hearings, proposed community development plan for 2025, and building code and fee schedule modifications, and a consent agenda on your list. As usual, as always, if you have a question on a consent agenda item, would you please let me know prior to Thursday so I may have the appropriate staff in the room to answer your questions. The next and final item today is Commissioner Communications, and you do have a policy session at 11:30. Go ahead, please, Chair.
Great, thanks. So it's the time for us for Commissioner Communication, and unless I'm missing anything else, Gary, I want to make sure that's it, right?
That's the final item for issues.
Yeah.
But then you have a policy session still this morning.
Okay. So, Martha, excuse me, I'll open it
I
up.
would like to talk a little bit about an opportunity I had. I went out to Scappoose, Oregon, where I visited OMIC, the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center. And that is the center, I know that a few years back, I went to Sheffield, England, when I was visiting family, and we looked at the model that Sheffield had come up with, and we have implemented it here in Oregon, in Scappoose. And what it is training in advanced manufacturing with co-location of an Oregon State University research team in materials manufacturing, and also having the students right there in proximity to some of the larger businesses that will be looking for their skill set as they get trained. So it's a way to streamline. It was very remarkable what I saw in England, and due to Senator Betsy Johnson's interest in this, of course, that's one of the reasons I believe it was in Scappoose, which is fine. But what I'm looking to do is to take that model and starting to have conversation. And Portland Community College is also very intimately involved in funneling students into that. So I've been looking to see what we can do potentially. I haven't had a meeting with Tim Cook yet, so I don't know if he's watching this or not. But they have just gotten dollars for a brand new manufacturing center from the bond they just passed. And I'm curious if we can't somehow, given their proximity to Oregon Tech, which is also involved with OMIC, you have basically Oregon Tech and Clackamas Community College with a co-presence in Wilsonville, to see if we can't start pulling in a little bit more of that innovation and research here in our county to replicate that model. And if I had a suggestion, being on the workforce board, the workforce training and development board appointed by the governor, my big take-home would be to suggest to the governor that this is a model that we should have hubs across the entire state. But I've been thinking about this for a while, and I knew I had to go see OMIC. It's very doable. They didn't have to build any new buildings. They did have existing buildings that they could use, but it's quite a remarkable visit. And I think it would be a boon to our business community here in Clackamas. And I know I'll be meeting with the Portland Community College president as well, just to see again how they are funneling kids into this manufacturing opportunity. The key thing is the research. That's what the difference is. In Sheffield, England, they had, places, they were doing nuclear containment research there. They were doing, night vision research there, you name it. They had actually research centers run by the actual businesses that were developing the products. And so their training was affiliated directly with the students. So most of the time, those students, even prior to graduating, immediately had a job in one of those institutions. And it actually pulled that area out of a major depression In Sheffield, it was a coal mining company, and or coal mining area, actually, and coal mining was pretty much shut down there, so they had a doom loop there, okay, as well. So I think the issue is to try and maybe do some innovation to get us out of the job doom loop, okay, which we seem to be experiencing now. And that should be done in conjunction with, at least with us, our land use analysis of where we have opportunities for industries to expand. So that's kind of what I've been working on, because my big things I'm interested in are workforce, getting people into good jobs, and then business and economic development. So I want to thank Senator Johnson and all the folks there, and more to come. I'd like to see our local community college maybe use some of their resources to get involved in this project. So that's what I got. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Schrader. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, brief update on the work I was doing last week and currently even last night. But last Tuesday I was not here. I was in Salem attending Oregon Transit Association gathering, and then the following day in Salem again on another transit matter. So I just kind of want to give you kind of an update and why this concerns us. I'm not talking light rail, just talking about basic bus service. You know, Clackamas County background has more of an aging population than most counties, not all, but most. So we have a growing older population who's in more need of transit options, lift services and so forth than ever before. And as our population grows, that population grows. So it's on my radar more than ever over the years, in the last several years, especially since HB 2017, my portfolio work in transportation has got a much greater portion of transit to it. And therefore, trying to bring to your attention that as I learning that certain transit agencies are, again, suffering from financial pressures due to fixed income, growing cost, outpacing the revenues they're getting. So we are trying to secure funding, HB 2017 funding, here 8 years later, but we're trying to secure it in a way that we can grow that, especially as revenues increase, if they do increase in this new bill. There's a small little carve out, maybe. I'm not sure how much will be decided by the end. But there are some moving pieces that are out of our control, and I'm trying to work with other providers and other entities to figure out a way that we can secure funding so we don't lose what we have and we can grow what we need to grow for our growing population in a very modest way. I will tell you that some of the stellar agencies that are doing a great job in not having anywhere near the financial difficulties is our Clackamas County providers, such as SMART in Wilsonville, Canby Transit, Sandy Transit. Last night was the R1 ACT meeting, and one of the presentations was from ODOT along with SMART, and they are running what's called a bus on shoulder line. They're going to open up later this year. That will run from Wilsonville with 3 stops in between all the way to Clackamas Town Center. And here recently, several months ago, late last year, Sandy Transit is connecting to the Clackamas Town Center as well. So Dwight Brashear, who's with SMART Wilsonville, made the statement, accurate, that you can go from Wilsonville all the way to Sandy for $1. You'll be a switch over, a transfer at Town Center. But those are the kind of connections that we're making that are, I won't say, they're somewhat unprecedented, but it just goes to show the good work that we're doing at the C4 level, and that we initially created all this good work, collaboration, and having what we call regional connections, regional coordination. And so the dollars specifically we're talking about are what's called regional coordination dollars. So just trying to secure that, and I am concerned that other pressures might be leading to bleeding or taking some of those dollars away from Clackamas County, and that's alarming. So I'm just bringing that to your attention. working on it. I'll have more to report as time goes on, hoping to have a meeting between now and the next time we meet next Tuesday. So maybe not, maybe it'll be a little bit later, but I'll keep you all posted. Chair, I yield back in the interest of time.
Thank you, Commissioner Sills. Commissioner West?
I don't know, the bulk of my time has been captivated by working with supported housing services, Metro, and the region on trying to grapple with the homelessness, substance abuse, behavioral health crisis that we are all acutely aware of. And last week, I had the honor to meet with the work group of mayors within the metro area. There's 6 of them. Each county has 2 mayors represented in that group. Portland, it's the city of Portland, it's Gresham. In Washington County, it's Sherwood and Beaverton. In Clackamas County, it's Milwaukee and Lake Oswego. And so that's the 6 mayors that we met with and had a really candid conversation about how we feel like this process is going, trying to reform supportive housing services and what we're going to do with those tax dollars and how we're going to approach this regionally. I'm telling people that there's been a lot of meetings, there's a lot of meeting fatigue, but we're having to strip this to the studs. We don't have voter trust. We don't have a clear vision. We don't know what we believe and why we're operating the way we are. We have certain organizations within the region that are objectively failing, and how does the region adjust to that and bring accountability? And we're in the unique process to have one of the leading voices. I co-chair that task force with Metro President Lynn Peterson. She was out this week, and it felt like this was the first meeting where we got a little bit of steam in the right direction, got really good feedback actually from the mayors. Clackamas County has been leading the way on a performance and systemic audit, also financially, to be done regionally. And we said we'll do it with or without you, but the voters expect this. We need better transparency. And I think for the first time since the measure maybe was enacted, that we got some uniform consent, not from all actors. And really, I believe that Clackamas County has led the way on bringing that transparency to the voters on how, and an audit forward. I think I'm even seeing Multnomah County for the first time in that meeting say, hey, here's our concerns, but we agree. I don't know how their board's going to vote. Nobody was speaking on behalf of their board, but there was a lot of consensus, and that's movement. That's real movement with this. We talked a lot about what are the key shifts we have to make policy-wise. Where have we been? What key shifts we have to make, and what does that future look like? And then what is our system not? Let's identify what it isn't, and what shifts do we need to make? And there were some productive but hard conversations, I think, that began to happen. And I'm optimistic, but we have a huge lift to regain the trust of the voters. What happens if we don't fix this the right way? We're going to have a broken governance model. We're going to have siloed systems. We're going to have a lack of trust, and the voters will not ever trust us to tackle this again, and we'll hit a funding cliff. And then what do we do with the infrastructure that we built? The language is changing. The ideas that are being allowed to be spoken in the room are more diverse. We are now actually having conversations around recovery. What is a recovery-oriented system of care? Where did the Housing First policies go wrong? How is funding changing? Where can we be more dynamic and holistic in our entire approach? How can systems talk to each other? And how can there be warm handoffs? Where are the barriers and the gluts within the bureaucracy so we can be more efficient? Can we just stop protecting our sacred cows and our sacred ideas and have honest conversations? That's the goal of this work group. It's been an honor to be able to co-chair it with Lynn Peterson. I'm glad that she's back. She had some family emergency she needed to deal with back east, and so I am glad she's back, and we're already in constant conversation about how to move forward with this. It seems very collaborative with Metro and Clackamas County. When I talk with their staff, and we kind of talk about it a different way, that like, where's Gresham? Why we don't have to replicate the whole thing. Why has Gresham been successful? Why is Clackamas County and Washington County wildly successful? Why is Beaverton uniquely successful? And how do we protect local autonomy, local control to address these issues as we implement them moving forward, while also realizing that we have a regional responsibility to one another? And so those are all questions being answered right now. So the work group is very important. Had a great conversation with the mayor of Portland yesterday regarding, future funding and how the region supports Portland, especially if Multnomah County is struggling to do so. How do we all step up? We're all in this together, a shared commitment. Great relationship with Mayor Wilson. I really appreciate his voice at the table. And then one thing that's moving forward is I created a framework about what an entire care continuum looks like. It looks a lot like what we're doing in Clackamas County. You guys have all seen my whiteboard where I had the boxes, and this is more of an expansion on that. And Commissioner Singleton, who is no secret, shares widely different political opinions than my own, but she also created a framework that was similar for like what her thoughts about moving forward. We had a meeting last week that was incredibly collaborative across the aisle, across ideological lines. Generally really like her, and we're looking forward to have multiple conversations, bring those frameworks together, present it to the work group to say, hey, opposing ideas, opposing philosophies in many senses, definitely on different political sides of the aisle, but really kind of in our nonpartisan seat, showing how we can be more nonpartisan, I guess, in our approach. And so she has a wealth of experience, and so we're trying to get there. And so we'll be presenting like actual mechanical nuts and bolts about how we should move forward as a region. I think next week. I mean, the next meeting. It's not next week, but yeah. So it's been a lot of work. A lot. It's probably consumed 90% of my time, more than 40 hours a week. But it's important that we get this right, and so. I'm excited. So that's what I have to report. That's I mean, I don't know, Chair, do you think the last meeting was probably out of this group of meetings might have been we kind of got over the hump of being productive? Yeah, so, and Chair Roberts is there with me in these meetings. And so, yeah, that's what I have to report with that. Still working hard to make sure that we meet the commitment and the moral obligation we have to those that struggle with homelessness, substance use disorder, behavioral health needs, our veterans, our families, our neighbors that are living and dying in the streets, and acting with that kind of urgency. And I think we have a moral imperative to get this right. So I'm a little bit heartened by the last meeting we had. And that's what I have, Chair.
Great. Excuse me. Thank you, Commissioner West. I just wanted to add kind of one thing to it. Part of, at that meeting, there was a lot of breakout groups and assigned different tasks and duties. And one of the things that we were assigned with to kind of come back to the county, I want to make sure the rest of the board's aware of it, is just helping create a mission, vision, and goal statement. So they've kind of tasked all the groups to doing that. So if we can kind of come together with some ideas on that. So in the interest of time, I see Daniel in the back patiently sitting there, so I want to thank you. And I'll go ahead and if there's no other comments by my colleagues, we'll go ahead and conclude today's administrator issues and updates, and we'll now move to our first policy session of the day. Gary, would you please introduce that for us?
Yes, Chair. Your first session is the future of the Emergency Preparedness Council. Daniel Neibauer is Director of Disaster Management. He will present. Go ahead, please, Daniel.
Good morning, Chair Roberts and Commissioners. Thank you for your time today. On March 11th, while seeking board interest to participate in interviews for the recruitment of members of the Emergency Preparedness Council, the board requested additional information and a discussion on the Emergency Preparedness Council. I'm here to provide information on the Emergency Preparedness Council, or as I'll call it, EPC, and seek direction from the board on its future. The EPC is an advisory board to disaster management and the Board of County Commissioners that was formed following the 2020 wildfires and 21 winter storm. Following these interests, community interest in the county's disaster planning and response increased significantly. The community wanted to better understand what the county was doing to prepare for disasters, how they could provide feedback, and ways they could be better prepared. As mentioned in the policy worksheet, the county responded to this concern in two ways. First, the board created the EPC, and second, disaster management took a look at its community engagement and involvement efforts and developed a methodology to better integrate those efforts into planning and outreach projects. The EPC had its first meeting in February 2022. It was formed with 15 voting members representing geographical and functional areas and 9 ex officio non-voting members, including all 5 commissioners and 4 subject matter experts. The initial bylaws tasked the group with a fairly broad purpose and goals. During the first few meetings, the group reviewed its bylaws and formed 5 committees to study different subject areas. Through the course of the next year, the EPC had difficulty meeting the quorum requirements of the bylaws. In addition, 2 of the subcommittees merged due to similar interests and the remaining 3 were not meeting consistently. In response, the board adjusted the bylaws to have voting membership of 7 to 9 members and remove the ex officio non-voting members. The subcommittees were also reduced to 1. The board also added a potential incident response role or goal to the group in the bylaws. The members of the EPC have a passion for emergency preparedness and many with extensive volunteer experience. They also have broad professional experience. While the members brought this experience to the EPC, the lack of subject matter background and technical expertise in emergency management have created challenges for disaster management. The recommendations from the group are well-intentioned, but often not aligned with national best practices in emergency management. And some of the goals of the EPC bylaws are likely too broad for the group to be successful and may not be appropriate for an advisory board. The EPC has provided a new pathway for community engagement, but this may be redundant as disaster management is now utilizing several avenues for increased public participation. Community engagement and involvement is now a key part of every planning project in disaster management, as well as the other plans that disaster management supports. In the past several years, we have met with the community to get feedback and discuss our planning efforts for the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan, Community Wildfire Protection Plan, Emergency Operations Plan, Volunteer and Donations Plan, Mass Care Plan, and Evacuation Planning. We are also planning to create mechanisms to solicit feedback on these plans, even when we're not currently in a revision cycle for them. We're also doing outreach through preparedness and other informational presentations to community planning organizations, hamlets, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, cultural groups, and many others. Pretty much anybody that requests a meeting with us or groups that we've been trying to reach out to. Staff has prepared 3 recommendations for the board. 1, retire the Emergency Preparedness Council. 2, provide further direction to disaster management regarding the role of the Emergency Preparedness Council. Or 3, take no action at this time. The EPC has provided valuable insight for the county's after-action analysis of the 2021 weather events, the fire and the winter storm. Disaster management has subsequently increased preparedness education with this important feedback. Now that learning has concluded, staff recommends option 1, retire the Emergency Preparedness Council.
All right, thank you. Questions? Any colleagues have any questions? Commissioner Savas.
So, Daniel, my question, I have a concern. I don't necessarily, I'm not adverse to the staff recommendation, okay? However, you know, I am concerned that maybe the integration of all the providers as well as the public and the ears and eyes on the ground in the community maybe not have a go-to, right? So these members that are passionate about this work and other members that were on this council that are no longer active that are also passionate, how do we engage them in a meaningful way? I'm going to give you one example, not necessarily quite related, but I learned from a few folks in the community that they're concerned that the CERT effort is kind of falling apart. That was supported by the fire district. Now the fire district's chosen not to do that. So, I mean, that's just one little piece of it. But altogether, I think that being mindful that, you know, whether it's God forbid, another forest fire or an ice storm or a Cascadia, that, you know what your job is, right? We know how important this is. So I would say my question to you in short is how can we redirect those folks and engage them in a way that helps close some of the gaps?
Sure. Many of them we've incorporated into our voluntary organizations active in disasters, which we've formed within the last year, either through organizations that they're already a member of or brought them into that. And that serves as a similar methodology for augmenting the county's response. So we've been definitely connecting those individuals with the CBOs that are active in their areas or in their subject area that they're interested in, as well as most of the individuals are active with their CPOs, but making that connection as well, so that we have their expertise. And they certainly have brought that and done emergency preparedness presentations to different CPOs, either the ones they're involved in or others that have helped do that. And the CPOs have become a great voice for us as well to make sure that we're hearing from those individuals, and those individuals can also contribute their expertise to those different groups.
Yeah, could you for my colleagues, could you explain where we are with CERT?
With CERT, so the Community Emergency Response Team came out of 9/11 in 2001 for volunteer organizations. And so it's a community organization that FEMA kind of runs and provides training to, and different jurisdictions handle it in different ways. Here in Clackamas County, it's sponsored by fire districts or different cities to go through and do the training. Clackamas Fire District 1 has kind of reorganized its priorities and is no longer sponsoring the group. And the different CERT, the Community Emergency Response Teams that were under its purview, are seeking other individuals. So I know the city of Milwaukee is picking up one. I believe Oak Grove Water was looking at potentially picking up another to help provide them sponsorship, liability coverage, and training. The county still provides funds for some of the training as well as equipment through other FEMA grants.
I just want my colleagues to know that it's not as robust as it was and organized as it was, so it's just a concern. That maybe we're going in the wrong direction if we use that as a barometer. It's not the only barometer, but I don't want to dismiss any of the good work we've done. But, you know, I know today's not the time and you're not prepared to talk about this, but I would like to just better understand what progress we're making overall in the emergency response arena, and just kind of get I won't say a dashboard, but at least some kind of metrics as how we're progressing.
Certainly, we can provide an update on our general planning efforts.
Thank you. Commissioner West.
Yeah, the CERT program was for a number of Wilsonville residents. They tried to get that up and running, and a big deal for them, but the city, getting into the details are unnecessary, but the city did not support that. And there were, I think, a pretty good chunk of individuals that were very interested in the CERT program. If this isn't effective and you think it's run its course, I think it's important, though, to have some community. I guess I don't understand, like, where you said, we have other means of community engagement. I see CERT program, like Commissioner Savas talked about, not being as robust as I think some of our constituents would like. We are talking about dismantling this advisory board, and I don't know what we do offer to keep people engaged, which I do think is important. I know that some of the board members here, like Chair Roberts, has probably the most experience by far in this arena. So I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but I'd like to still understand. I'd like to understand better about how we're engaging with our communities.
Certainly, within the disaster management world, all of our planning efforts, it is now, I tell all the planners, community engagement has to be a part of this and beyond just surveys. So, for example, the wildfire evacuation planning effort that we have going on, which will have a campaign coming out in the May-June timeframe for that. We've met with community-based organizations across the region, particularly in rural areas that are greater affected. We've done some one-on-one interviews with some leaders in the communities to do that. And then we did have a survey as well to pull that in. That's phase 3 of the effort. Phase 2 was meeting with all the cities and reviewing the efforts that we have done there. So every planning effort now has to have a community engagement portion where we're sitting down purposely talking about that particular topic area. So upcoming I believe this fall is mass care. So we're working on our mass care plan. How are we taking care of people as we saw in 2020 wildfires? But even as small type things like in this past January in 2024, when we had that, right? So we want to be able to understand what is it that the community wants. We don't want to show up with just, here are all the resources we have, use what you need. What is it that you need? What can we provide? And so that's where our community engagement is critical in that, so we can sit down and write a plan so we better understand what that is. So all of our planning efforts now do that. Also within outreach, we're meeting with, we've upped our meetings with our community planning organizations, because that's a great source of information to understand that. We've done that jointly with Clackamas Fire or other fire agencies to be able to get an understanding of, be in the same room, right? We can understand what the community wants. Fire understands it. Have we met with fire with them to understand what it is? And so reviewing what we were hearing feedback, good, bad, and is fine. We'll take it all. What is it the community's effort? And if I can't answer the questions there, being able to come back to them and understand
So,
more.
quick question. Are we seeing a change in best practices in how we engage our community? Has it changed since CERT? Has it changed since we submitted this, we set up this advisory board? And then what are actual real outcomes we've gotten through our community engagement? Sounds like we've done a lot, but what are the outcomes?
So I think one of the biggest ones is changing our evacuation procedures. And so that was one of the big things that kind of generated the EPC was the concern specifically of 213. Right, backing up. And so we took a lot of that information back. Then we went out to the community. It's part of our current evacuation effort. And we discussed what does the evacuation levels mean? What is it that, when and why are you going to evacuate? What information do you need to get to evacuate and to feel like you're getting accurate information? What are those sources of information? So that is all wrapped into our evacuation planning and pulling that in. And then, we now have a completely different procedure on how we do evacuations. We're pulling a team together at CCOM that sits there and shares that information. We're understanding and looking for where the community is looking for that information to be able to get there. So that procedure that we use to evacuate has completely changed, as well as the information that we provide to the community, because we have a better understanding of the information that they're looking for.
Thank you.
Great. And we've had a number of conversations. One thing you might kind of enlighten the board too is just that one of the key things is kind of our relationship with the cities, how often you meet with them, and maybe you just touch on that real quickly, because which is really critical.
Certainly. Previous to COVID and to the 2020 wildfires, we met with the cities, I think, on a quarterly basis. Now we meet with them on a monthly basis, invite all of the city and special district emergency managers or emergency management rep. I understand that every city doesn't have an emergency manager, and review with them the things that we're doing, give them updates for there, and then talk about their concerns. And that has brought up valuable things about how we receive information from them. In the middle of an incident, we also meet with them, whether the incident is specific to that jurisdiction or larger, just to inform them. So, for example, the Camp Creek fire, we were meeting with all of the cities and special districts on a regular basis so that they understood the updates, and we were informing them. And we learned that we need to be able to also be checking in with the cities on an individual basis. We've had incidents where they don't necessarily want to say that they need help, so we're also reaching out to them individually and confirming the information that we hear with them. And that's been a valuable source for us, and we certainly have changed our procedures for how we are getting information and giving information to them based on the frequency that we're talking with them.
Yeah, and the only thing I might add too is just that that I believe it's important the board support emergency management and disaster management on, I'm trying to get them involved in these disaster overhead teams. And when you deploy staff to these other disasters, they come back with just an incredible wealth of knowledge to help us better prepare. So I know you were involved in some of the wildfires where you went over on the east side of the mountain, and it really also enlightened us of some of the challenges just in our own state. So anyway, it's just something I think is really important, because while you might just think it's a resource going there, you come back with so much more information about helping us be better prepared for a disaster in the future. So Commissioner Salas.
Yeah, well, thanks for your input there, Craig, because your background in Sheriff's Department and emergency response, you have a better understanding probably of that than maybe most of us up here. My question to you, Daniel, earlier is how can we redirect those people? And that's why I brought up CERT. And if that's not really strong, I don't think CPOs, I think maybe some of the rural CPOs are probably more engaged that way than the urban. But, the wildfires weren't that long ago. Some people have short memories. I want to be able to sit up here and say, if we do, close this particular function, with this committee, and be able, I want to be able to make sure we defer them. I don't want the narrative to be that CERT's falling apart and this is falling apart and therefore we're doing nothing. That's a bad narrative out there, right? And I think that, to some degree, I did reach out to the fire chief, Clackamas fire chief, about this. So I'm almost at that point to maybe approaching board members, for example, on the fire district board. It seems like they're, just knowing the structural command of an emergency and knowing their role in that, Chair, if you have any other thoughts on that, but I'm just wondering if we can make an appeal to at least bond, get that glue, those connectivity so that CERT becomes more viable. Unless there's if there's a more better mechanism for those local ears and eyes, folks that are interested and concerned, because that was devastating to a number of people. And I think the impacts were, felt by fewer than the majority of the population, the severe impacts. But nonetheless, I think we ought to learn from that lesson, not be seen as stepping away from it.
Yeah, we certainly are directing a lot of members, and a lot of members are already involved with other. There is CERT. CERT is a valuable program. It's also a very resource-intensive program, both in physical items and in labor to kind of keep it up and keep it organized. There are others like Red Cross, Mercy Corps that provide the same thing. Team Rubicon is another great one that has a lot of resources and are very active in preparedness planning and response that we certainly would direct members to become there. And they have organizations and structures set up already to do that. So we certainly would want to do that. And I know many of these members will still reach out to me and provide me good insight and information in the midst of an incident when something's going on.
Yeah, well, that's my hesitancy right now, and frankly, my reservation. I mean, I'm not saying this is working because clearly it's having some struggles. I get that. I've talked to members about that. So I think, again, stepping up our game and doing it in a way that there's something. I'm not here to say that CERT's the answer or CERT as a structure is the answer, but something. I appreciate Red Cross and all that stuff, but the fabric of the community in a case of emergency and all those connections is that's not their scope of work typically, as I understand it, right? It is on the ground when they're on the ground, but I'm just talking in preparedness, absent an emergency, they're not there, trying to make sure that the fabric of the community and the emergency response with local fire, local law enforcement, local community members, active community members is in place, unless I'm wrong.
Red Cross is fairly involved. I will say the most preparedness fairs we go to, they're actively in there. They talk to the fire quite consistently, usually on a smaller incident basis than we are. They're there for the larger incidents, for sheltering too. But one of the first calls that fire makes in a resident fire is to Red Cross,
Right.
and they get out there and they are providing support to. It doesn't matter how big or small that house was. They're out there making sure that the individuals do that. So they're certainly there, but they're in larger efforts too. And similar to CERT, there are some areas that are more or less active, but I know that the chapter of the Red Cross here is fairly active within the entire Portland region.
Well, we had good intentions to try to set this committee up, on the heels of that disaster, and I just want to make sure that we can transition it to something. I've already said it. I'm done.
All right. Any other questions? Do I hear a motion? I'm looking here.
Are we done talking?
Well, I think, here's, I guess, being involved in emergency management, one of the key things, that's why I asked, how is our communication with our cities, right? Because in the event of a disaster, that coordination, because people can volunteer for all our cities. There's a number of volunteer groups, and the coordination is absolutely essential with our staff in the cities when it comes to a disaster, because hundreds of people are going to ask, what can they do? And making sure we have a plan, because there is also a lot of liability in it. You have to do certain training and make sure you're up to speed on all these different trainings. And so that's where I kind of see, it's really, my belief is focusing on our staff, our region, to make sure those leaders that will coordinate this event are there, that we encourage people to participate in the countless number of volunteer groups. There's tons in SAR that help out in these incidents, and many others. So you look like you wanted to make a comment, so I want to.
I think part of it gets back to the broad nature of the purpose of this group, that crossed between incident response, kind of preparedness, and emergency management. And it's a very wide group. The incident response is not something that disaster management does, which sounds silly, we do a lot of coordination, right? We look at all the response partners and we make sure that they're all working toward similar goals. We're not duplicating efforts. We're not leaving a gap. But we don't get out in the field. Anecdotally, I'll say one of the first things this group wanted to do was direct traffic. And that is certainly not something that I'm going to ask untrained folks to do, to get out and do that. You know, that is unsafe for many, many people. The preparedness side, we have a very worked out methodology of preparedness that the state and the Red Cross have put down, right? And here are the things we want to do. There are many lofty preparedness goals. I want people to have water and food, and if I'm lucky, a go bag. That if I can do that, then our community will be much well prepared. But there's certainly obstacles to that economically and many other reasons to do that. And the emergency management side of that is kind of that coordination is a very niche area to work on, and a lot of expertise that we do that advisory wise is difficult to find folks that have that background and expertise. So that broad nature of this group, I think, made it difficult for them to address many of these different areas. And the response side is what I'm concerned with. I don't want a group that feels that they have a response role when we're looking for something advisory.
Commissioner Schrader? Yeah.
So I guess the suggestion I would make is this. It sounds like you don't really need them in a response mode directly because that is putting them into peril as well. You need trained personnel and trained people. So should we, I guess, colleagues, if we retire this committee, it doesn't mean that after the fact of another disaster, we couldn't pull together a group of citizens to kind of do a debriefing about what worked for them and what didn't, which I think is what this committee was supposed to do. But it doesn't sound as if there's enough, that really this is a response to something that has happened and getting, maybe kind of codifying some of the input. So I would be okay retiring the committee with the understanding that, again, you will do outreach after the fact, and we will get the community engagement directly for a debrief from people to see what they're, because as you said, the most important thing that happened this go-round was really getting the feedback on how people were deployed to get out of the area. Okay, so that's a good piece of information. So I don't know, colleagues, if I was to make a motion to retire the Emergency Preparedness Council, to retire it at this time with on the legislative record that, should another emergency, something like this, that we would continue to somehow do an ad hoc to get feedback. That's what I would suggest, but. Because I watched Estacada. I was out in Estacada and I saw everything they were doing, and yes, some of it was a little scary where they were actually putting themselves in peril. We literally had people out there on tractors, like fighting fires, who didn't particularly have any training. They just had equipment, jumped on it, and did it. So those are the kinds of issues we wrestle with when you get folks who are not trained in this particular area. And we're lucky we had no loss of life. So, I don't know.
So, I'll make the second, but I'm going to make an amendment, a friendly amendment. And the friendly amendment being to add that we direct staff to come back in, 3 to 6 months with some kind of means of addressing that connectivity piece with the community. And I don't know if maybe some of these members that are on the council today can make a recommendation or an idea. Gary, I was looking at you just thinking about the role of CPOs. We used to have the annual meeting with the CPOs. That might be a topic if they're interested in engaging, but I'd like to make sure there's a path, some kind of a path or inquiry forward on how we proceed, not just retire.
Yeah.
So my friendly amendment is to direct staff to come back in 3 to 6 months with a means of transitioning to a different form of community involvement as it relates to emergencies.
In other words, you may want to have key people in communities who experienced it, but with the knowledge, as you said, they're responding as lay people, and there's certain things that they are, you said, directing traffic, big no-no. They were doing that, by the way, out there in the hinterland, and it was not safe for people, so. All right.
Gary Schmidt had a.
You already have a committee, commissioners. It's called the Committee for Community Involvement, CCI.
So
They
how
meet
about
every
we-
single week, and their purpose is to advise you on effective public involvement. You could ask that group to make this a subcommittee, or as needed, advise Daniel and you on preparing for emergencies or after one has occurred. So I respectfully suggest you already have a format where you can still get this feedback. Before or after, because that's really what the value is, before or after an event.
Okay.
When something's happening, Daniel's and his team are running with it, with cities and others. That's not the time, it's before or after. So an idea, if Commissioner, that might answer your question right now. That's one format that can automatically,
Okay.
it already exists. You can task them to make that part of their charge.
So instead of a friendly amendment, can we get that on do you want to make a motion to task that to the CCI? Another
Well, I wouldn't want to discount CCI. I understand exactly what CCI does, and it's more policy and maybe advisement to the Board of County Commissioners on how to improve public involvement and those kinds of things. This is more detailed and specific, so sure, that would be a great addition. I wouldn't say that that's not worthwhile, Gary, but something on a greater community level scale with, again, as we kind of just touched on, if CPOs were more interested in getting engaged, great, but something, all the above, something.
So how about, here's what I hear. And I've heard Martha make a motion to retire or attempt to make a motion to retire the
I will-
Preparedness Council, but continue to help direct those volunteers to connectivity to
Right.
other communities.
I would say
correct?
that's accurate. Let's say
Right.
that there
I
is the
mean,
motion
and
on the table.
I know Gary has mentioned CCI, but perhaps there's other ones that, and have you come back in 3 to 6 months and kind of elaborate what those are. Does that sound appeasable?
Yeah, but I would like a report back, so I think my motion was
Okay.
along the lines of 3 to 6 months, come back with
Right.
some kind of an update.
And that would just mean you'd interface with the CCI.
So could you go ahead and repeat your motion then, so I have it? Did I get it correctly?
You got it correctly.
All
Do I have
right,
to
so,
repeat? So we need a second.
and, yeah, we still need a second. Are you all right with Martha's motion?
Well, would you like to repeat what you heard and then make a different motion?
Yeah, I'll make a different motion.
Go ahead, let's do that. All right.
I don't know what we're doing. I don't know where we're at.
Well, I would say that I would like to retire this particular body
Okay.
and take Commissioner Savis's suggestion that you come back in 3 to 6 months with at least a report on how you're involving people in this planning process in more detail. Would that?
If that's the motion, I'll second it.
All right, great.
Okay.
Let's just
And
do that.
which is-
Let's get
okay.
it. Let's get that done.
So,
Okay.
trying to restate that, Martha has moved that we'll retire the Preparedness Council. You'll continue to help direct volunteers. You'll come back to this board, give us a report on kind of how that, in 3 to 6 months, kind of how that connectivity piece is working.
that's good.
I've heard it seconded by Commissioner Savas. Any further discussion? Wow, hearing none. Clerk, will you call the poll for me?
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we'll reconvene this afternoon for the policy session, begin at 1:30. I just thank you all for joining us. Anything else before we close, Gary?
No, but you all have another meeting in 3 minutes.
All right,
That's the
thank you.
day today.
We do?
Well, welcome back, everyone, to this afternoon session on April 8th, 2025. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, would you like to call the roll for us?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Commissioner Savas is at a State Transportation Committee meeting. There is a quorum present. Roll call, Commissioner Schrader,
Here.
Commissioner West.
Here.
Chair Roberts.
Here. All right, thanks, Gary. Would you please introduce the next policy session?
Yes, your next session is Portland Metro Chamber 2025 State of the Economy Report. Our staff from Transportation and Development, the Office of Economic Development, will kick this off and introduce our guests who will do the presentation. Laura Edmonds, Economic Development Manager, will present, kick off, although Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development, is here if needed for questions. Go ahead, Laura.
All right, thanks. Chair Roberts, Commissioners, good afternoon. Nice to be before you today. Just as a reminder, when the February 20th, 2025 Portland Metro Chamber released their 2025 State of the Economy Report, you guys had indicated interest in wanting them to be present to be able to explain the report, answer your questions. So today is an informational session only, just for the benefit of your learning more about the reports that Eco Northwest had produced for Portland Metro Chamber. So today with us, we have two guests that are going to present to you. Andrew Hone, the President and CEO of Portland Metro Chamber, and Brittany Bagent with Eco Northwest, and she's the program or project director that worked with PMC on this project. Okay? So I'm going to step out. They're going to step up and present to you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you so much. Come on. Good morning.
Hi.
If you could just introduce yourself, and thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us. After you, Brittany.
Good afternoon, Chair Roberts and Commissioners. My name is Brittany Bagent, and I'm a project director with Eco Northwest. Pleased to be here today.
And hello, Andrew Hone, President and CEO, Portland Metro Chamber, and thanks for having us. We're so appreciative that you invited us here to be with you today. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioners and staff as well. Laura, also thank you for making this so seamless to be here today. I'll do a very brief introduction because the star of the show really is Brittany and the information that we're going to be sharing today. But just a little bit of a history and background about where this came from, why we do this, and a little context around the sharing of this information. So if you hearken back to the last big troubles we had in the Great Recession, a erstwhile group of private sector and associations came together to create something called the Value of Jobs. And was it 2009, I think we're giving its origin date? For the obvious reason, we had lost a lot of jobs, our economy was struggling, and it was important to remind all of us about why the economy matters and that it needs to be talked about, prioritized, and built into policy conversations. The good news is that every single year since that time, we have released nearly the exact same report with the obvious update to whatever the data is sharing in the moment. So this is a nearly 15-year-old documentation of the region's economy. This is not just a Portland thing. By definition, what Brittany will be sharing today will be about the 4 counties that make up our regional economy. We're on probably the only place in the United States that has such a massive policy difference inside of its own economic boundaries. And I am highlighting the difference between the Oregon side and the Washington side because the two share such dramatic differences in the way that they regulate and have relationships with the private sector. It's almost like talking about 2 different planets in some cases, and I think you'll see a lot of that play out today. I want to acknowledge this is made entirely possible by the private sector for one and only singular purpose, just to share this information over time. We do this in partnership with organizations you know and I'm sure and confident trust. Folks like the Port of Portland, Prosper Portland is our economic development agency in the city of Portland, Greater Portland Incorporated, Oregon Business and Industry, which is the statewide chamber, and then Oregon Business Council, which is the CEO group for the state. I'll sort of end and toss it to Brittany to present this. This isn't a pick-me-up kind of a presentation, so I'm apologizing in advance, and don't blame Brittany or the economic firm that does this. But I think it's important to note that we have been on a 30-year tear as a community in terms of our economic growth and expansion. That's to be celebrated. The changes over the last 5 years, doesn't matter if you're in Clackamas, Multnomah, Washington, or Clark, have not all been positive. That much is also obvious. But what's important is that we're talking about this issue, that we focus on the economy and recognize it's not going to get any easier in the years ahead, and this will require true public-private partnership. So it's with that spirit that I toss it over to Brittany, and her incredible presentation, frankly, is an eye-opener, and we're really proud to be supportive of getting this to you today. And with that, Brittany, take it away.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. All right. Perfect. So what you have on the screen in front of you is an abbreviated presentation. I believe you have a full deck in your in the attachments and handouts. So this is intended to offer an overview of the research and the work. I'm happy to address any questions in the full deck or in this abbreviated version. So with that, we can get started with these 4 key challenges. So the full report is organized effectively raising 4 challenges in the region. And again, as Andrew said, we're talking about the bi-state 4-county region. And those challenges, which I will unpack following this, are the fact that we've had population in decline in this region. And that's from a couple of different dynamics that we'll talk about. Our region is near last in job growth when we look at ourselves in comparison to other regions across the country. We know that remote work fundamentally changed our central city. When we say central city, we're talking about the Portland central city, including downtown, but extending up to the Pearl, down to the South Waterfront, over to the Central East Side Industrial Area, and up to Albina, so that larger central city region. And the fourth and final challenge, and perhaps the most challenging of them, is that growth is not a given. And because of our research, we are saying that we need to really compete for population growth and for jobs, or we will continue to fall behind. And that is perhaps an uncomfortable space for us to be in, coming from Oregon and from a lot of historical culture and how we approach growth and competition, but we'll talk about that a bit more as well. And the biggest takeaway for this that will hopefully resonate with you all is that there's urgency behind needing to align our economic development priorities, and that's across all jurisdictions, across the entire region, and aligning those with a lot of urgency. And our partners at DHM do a lot of survey and sentiment-related work, and they've uncovered that over the last year, our region has seen a lot of sentiment improving in terms of how people think about our central city and think about the region and think about Portland. And it's largely related to quality of life type issues. So things like homelessness, visible homelessness, and trash and graffiti and things like that. But we think that that's a result of a lot of really intentional work between our public and private sectors, working in coordination, working with urgency. So what we are saying is if we can take that urgency and take that effort and align that, we'll see a lot of momentum in some of these fundamentals as well. So the first challenge is related to population decline, and this is a chart showing historical population change over the last several years across all of the counties. You may notice Multnomah County in the top left corner has declined the most over the last couple of years. And while Clackamas has not declined as much as Multnomah County, it's pretty much stagnant right now. We haven't seen a lot of growth or a lot of decline in the last couple of years. But what's striking about this is that the county was growing quite consistently prior to the pandemic. And most of the loss we've seen in Multnomah County is due to net domestic migration. So that means that people are moving out of Multnomah County to other parts of the country. And if you contrast that with what's happening in Clark County, while they declined around 2020 with the pandemic, have really bounced back, and they've seen pretty remarkable growth, especially when compared to the other counties in the region. So people move around. This happens all the time. It happens every day. People, what we consider, vote with their feet. So people will relocate and choose a community that best aligns with their interests or job opportunities or housing affordability or any number of things. So people are moving in and out. But people are also born and people die in communities every day. And so this is looking at our natural population change. And up until about 2007, 2008, the metro region, so this is the 4-county region, could count on 15,000 more people being added to our population every year, just because there were 15,000 more people born than dying in our region. But that number is dropping quickly, and we expect to have more people dying in our region than being born in the next 5 years. Which means that we will be solely reliant on those people from other parts of the country and other parts of the world moving into our region. We can no longer rely on natural change as being a positive contribution to population change. And I'll share too that this is not a Portland Metro phenomenon. This is not just happening locally. This is happening across the country. We're seeing this in all communities. What's stark about our region is that we're declining faster. So while most metro areas will hit that zero line and will drop negative, ours is expected to do so sooner. So again, back to the people moving in, moving out. We get this question a lot. Why is population declining? And these charts, these bar charts are looking just at Multnomah County. Is it more people are moving out, fewer people are moving in? So we wanted to take a look at that a little bit more closely. And what we learned is that we have in Multnomah County about 30,000 people moving in every year, and that's stayed pretty consistent over the last several years. What's different is that people are moving out of Multnomah County in higher numbers. Some of them are going to Clackamas County, many of them are going to Clark County, and other areas around the country. And to further look at this migration dynamic, it's important to look at who is moving out and some of those economic conditions that they bring with them or take with them to other communities. And so this series of charts is looking at the incomes of people who are staying in a community in yellow, the people who are moving out of a community in red, and the people who are moving in to a community in green. So again, starting with Multnomah County, you can see that the yellow, red, and green lines follow pretty well in parallel with one another up until the pandemic, and then we saw a pretty stark divergence of effectively income leaving Multnomah County. And so people earning more money are leaving the county versus those moving in, which is not, shouldn't be entirely surprising. We see younger people earlier in their careers, a lot of students moving to more urban counties. But so that's, while it shouldn't be surprising, that divergence is pretty surprising. We drop down to Clackamas County. We see that the people who are staying in the county, so who have lived here for over a year, tend to have higher incomes, and people who are moving into your county have higher incomes than those moving out. So with that, they're bringing their income, their buying power, their those economic conditions, which can also impact cost of living and have other trade-offs with that. So it's not entirely just none of these are a single quick story. There's a lot behind all of them. The second challenge we have is around lagging jobs in this region. So this is a series of charts looking across, looking at our region. And historically, in the Portland metro region, in times of economic expansion, so when the country is doing really well, the Portland metro region does better. In times of economic recessions, the Portland metro region declines faster. And that has been a pretty consistent pattern for many years. And so looking at 2023 data, where you see the red arrow, we saw this trend reverse. And we saw while the U.S. was expanding, the Portland metro region was also expanding, so also adding jobs, but not quite to the same degree. And we thought, is this an anomaly? Is this a one-off happenstance? But looking over to 2024, we see that it is not. So at least this is 2 years of consistent data. And so depending on the data source, so either the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Oregon Employment Department, those are the lighter green and yellow colors, depending on the data source you look at, we've either as a region lost jobs or barely gained jobs. And so either way, it is quite different from a time of economic expansion across the country. So we wanted to look into this further. What industries are being impacted by this? Where are we seeing growth? Where are we seeing this decline? So this is looking, again, across the region at a series of industries. And we do have job growth in several industries. Private education and health services is one of them. This number of 15,200 jobs is mostly in healthcare. There's very few private education jobs in there. And what we've come to find out is that these are effectively a correction coming out of the pandemic. So there were significant layoffs and then rehires under contract workers, and now these are rehires under permanent employees. And so we see that as more of a correction. We also see an increase in government jobs, which is not typically the sector you want to see for an economic engine for a region. But where we're seeing the decline is what's most concerning. Things like professional business services, manufacturing, financial activities, those are all industries we consider traded sector. So they are people working in those industries are selling their goods and services outside of the region and bringing new money in. And so when we see decline in those areas, that's what's most concerning for us. And in the light teal colors, so professional business services, financial activities and information, those are all what we would consider traditionally office-centric jobs. So when we think about the office vacancies, we can see that close connection there. We also wanted to take a look at what is happening across the region. We know that these aren't conditions felt consistently in each of the counties. Multnomah County is in the orange color, and this is measuring recovery from prior to the pandemic, effectively showing us that Multnomah County has not recovered all of its jobs since pre-pandemic. We're at about 97% of the jobs we had just prior to the pandemic, whereas Clackamas and Washington counties have fully recovered, although not, they haven't grown nearly as fast as Clark County has. Now, when we think about, this is a graphic to consider our central city, and I'm not sure how many of you have attended other presentations with this topic or if you followed the news, but the term doom loop has caught on quite quickly, and so this is the graphic showcasing what a doom loop is. And this is specific to Portland Central City, and a doom loop is an academic concept that shows if we have starting with reduced demand, whether that be population or jobs, we will begin to see urban revenues fall, and therefore investment will be constrained, and then services will be reduced, and there may be a reduction in your quality of life in that area. And what's important to us is to recognize that we are seeing signs of this concept in our region, specifically in our central city. It matters less to us where we are, what stage we are in this loop. Are we on the precipice of it? Are we in it? What's important is we're seeing signals of this. So hence the need to act with urgency. So specific to the city of Portland, we track office leasing activity and vacancy data. This is specifically looking at leasing activity. So prior to the pandemic, the city of Portland had around 835,000 square feet of office leased on average each quarter. And that dropped to about 400,000 in 2023 per quarter, and we've come up since 2024, but we still are not nearly to that level we were pre-pandemic, which really just begs the question of what is our central city for? Who is it for? Is it for these traditional office jobs? We're losing those jobs. So it's intended to spark some of that conversation. And back to the survey results I'd referenced earlier, while we see a lot of improvement in voter sentiment on things like homelessness and cost of living, affordable housing, that's in those orange bars, there's much less concern among voters around growth and density and jobs. And what we are saying through this research and through this work is that those need to be of top priority, because without the revenue that comes from these jobs and without that vitality and activity, we cannot continue to provide the services to address these cost of living, or these quality of life issues. And while we could talk for a very long time about housing affordability, we wanted to share one quick graphic for you. It likely speaks for itself, but looking at affordability across the region, which is quickly declining, assuming that a household is able to save 20% for a down payment, assuming they were able to secure a 6.5% mortgage rate, and they earn the median income, there are only very small pockets in our region where they can find affordability. And so speaking to the need for these high-paying jobs and these traded sector jobs. So there's a lot of certainly challenges that we're facing, but why we think this matters is because preventing further progress or the start of, or however you want to characterize a doom loop, really requires bold actions to try to reverse some of this or prevent some of this from continuing. And what we are saying is that we, as a region, as a state, really need to be much more accelerated in our competition for households and talent, people moving here. We need those people in those jobs, and we need more residents, because we cannot rely on natural growth anymore. We also need to diversify our economy and not simply rely on one or two key sectors. And we have felt among the region that we, as Andrew mentioned, were enjoying very healthy economic successes for many years. And we cannot assume we will return to that state and assume that these things will resolve themselves, because they won't. We are looking at different conditions and need to be much more action-oriented if we're going to pull into what we would consider as a virtuous cycle, which is the graphic you see on the right. So once you start to see more investment, more revenue, more services, to create these places where people really can thrive. That's all I have for you today. With that, would be happy to answer any questions.
Wow, that was fantastic. I have a number of questions, but I see my colleague over here, West, let you go first, sir.
Well, thank you. I saw this presentation. You did this with a bunch of the leaders, the elected leaders, and throughout the Portland region. They came up to downtown Portland to the office and heard this presentation. This is really not great news, right? Here's what I think is one of the reasons why this place used to grow is because you could raise your family here. They could get a good education in a non-failing school. They could look out that window and see beautiful Mount Hood. They had a temperate climate. It was a little artsy. It was fun. They had communities that made them feel a part of something. And then a lot of our policies, public policies, caught up to us. And then we accelerated bad policies. We saw things like Measure 110 turn one of the crown jewels in the city of Roses into a city of despair. That you can't overcome that overnight. We saw crime all of a sudden in this quaint little West Coast city skyrocket. We saw a summer of rioting and chaos and burning of buildings, all under the guise of social justice. While those of us that have to go to work every day, pay the bills, and still show up for this community were discredited and told to be quiet, with some pejorative attached to it. I think that this is an outcome of the political status quo. And Oregonians had said they prioritize this. This is an outcome of who you vote for and the policies you get behind, or being asleep at the wheel and not speaking up. A lot of the electeds in the Portland area, they believe that business is exploitive. That's how they see business community. They ask you to always be there to be their piggy bank and to bail out their big social, innovative, breaking new public policy ideas, but they also don't respect the fact that you still have to sign the front of a check and not just the back of one. They advocate for heavier regulations. They stifle business innovation. They have a history of being completely anti-growth and not even shy about it. That is where they stand. And they believe that your profits and ability to make a profit is immoral. Yeah, we're in an economic urban doom loop. Surprise. The economist that kind of brought this before us, Mike Wilkerson, was he also the one that presented in the meeting?
Yes, he was.
Yeah,
Yep.
Mike's a great guy. This is what the world thinks of Portland and the rest of the nation. He says, our image is a dumpster fire. That's a quote. He said, we probably already entered the doom loop and we ain't gonna even know it till we can't get out of it, or we start to somehow get out of it. We have our economic activity plummeting, tax revenue is catering, and more than $1 billion has already left Multnomah County in the last 2 years to places where people can just feel like they can have a little more liberty, a little more ability to stretch their legs, and a little less hassle. And I don't walk down the streets without seeing human despair everywhere. Clark County versus Clackamas County. Clark County is doing better than Clackamas County by all measures, but within the metro region, because it's policy driven, Clackamas County has weathered the best within the metro area. We tend to be the also most purple political kind of county within the metro area. I don't think that's by accident. Another important point is that Portland's job growth has been near the bottom of the 50 largest metropolitan areas over the last 12 months. We're actually now no longer a top 25 metropolitan area. We have lost too much population. We've fallen out of the top 25. And Portland ranks 80th out of 81 metro areas in a recent Urban Land Use Institute report. Well, we're not 81. It angers and it saddens me because I love it here. I'm 6 generations here. And to the business community, I know that you guys are taking it in the teeth all the time and try to have to figure out how to navigate this. This is by design. You can look up the makeup of certain bodies within the greater Portland area. And it's a struggle based on how they want to govern it and what their perception is about economic growth. They do not prioritize it. Your own data says it. Like what it takes to deal with this, they don't prioritize it. It was the bottom of the chart. Also, our land use laws make it almost impossible for families my age or families like me trying to buy a property because we go all the way back to, I think it's not Hatfield, who's the governor? McCall. Tom McCall, he basically said, come visit, don't stay here. And he created policies that made sure that we couldn't actually grow, anti-growth policies. And now it's almost impossible for somebody like me or somebody a little younger than me that wants to try to build the economic ladder and buy their home and have a little space for their own family. It's almost impossible, while a bunch of people that got that opportunity sit there and virtue signal with the rest of us, how dare us, the environment, or whatever reason, or we're gonna end up being explosive like LA, or alarmism, or all the things they do. I don't know, I'll stop. I don't have a lot of questions for you. I just think that this is the outcome of radical, ideologically driven, bad policies that has driven one of the most exceptional places on the planet into, it's an economic term, into a doom loop, into all these other things we're concerned about. And unless we wake up and unless we elect different leaders and we take a hard stance, I don't know if we can pull out of it.
Commissioner Schrader.
So, okay, well, I get it, Ben. I'm with you. But my question is this. Okay, let's start looking for solutions. So what is Clark County doing differently in your estimation that has somehow
Right. And
part of the region that, that we can, I know, Ben, you've got ideas, I've got ideas, Laura's got ideas, but so what are you seeing there that is so fundamentally?
I do want to just wrap a couple of these things together, and I'll let Brittany talk about this too as well. And it's without the benefit of a much grander presentation, which you get to see. The level of detail that this firm goes into for the benefit of all of us is pretty exceptional. There's not really a stone left unturned. And traditionally, we always ask them to look a little bit deeper into something every year, like it could be about housing affordability, about taxes, and this year we really didn't ask them to do that. We just said, hey, we've got, as you noted, a lot of new elected officials in our community, specifically in Portland, whole new city council, right? We didn't have one really before. We had 5 mayors, now we have 12 city council members and a mayor. We've changed a lot inside the course of a year. So this was about a level set, and also the fact that we have the benefit of seeing well in advance what is coming, right? The firm starts to produce this data sometimes in October and November and sort of says, here's what's coming. So we get the benefit of coming into places in a conversation and say, hey, these are yellow lights, these are red lights, these are some positives we can build on. So overall, what I think is important to note is really to recognize some of the things you're saying, Commissioner West, that at this point, we've moved past anything of blaming a pandemic, a public health closures. We're not, that whatever was going to happen has happened. So what you're looking at now is the new normal, right? The new normal is what we have right in front of us, and you've seen the data, it's not pretty. In addition to, I just want to call it some big existential issues that we're facing, right? Our semiconductor industry is challenged significantly. If you had the benefit of a bigger presentation, you would note the incredible dependence that we have on semiconductors, on the benefit we've really gained from it over the past decade or two, has perhaps masked some issues that we faced locally because the state and the region have really gone, we'll just say, gone on the coattails of the semiconductor industry here in a big way. And that's a good thing, but it's also when it struggles, so do we. And then to the point on policy issues, yes, right now at this point in time, everything is human policy related. And so it's both the cause of and solution to our problems. So what I would say is a couple things that has happened locally, and I would point to a few things for you. And it was about a year ago, I would say, Advanced Portland was produced. So the city, just to your comments, Commissioner, stated very publicly that it recognized to accomplish all of its goals, it needed growth. And you might say, okay, that doesn't seem like a rocket surgery, but for our community, it was the acknowledgement that if we want to do all these big visionary things, that we need to have growth, we need to have the private sector, we need to have building happening, construction has to occur. These things are not mutually exclusive from some of the goals that the city had laid out. So I just want to point to that specific document to say, hey, if there's alignment within our community, that's probably it, because it has a lot of information that if it was a regional document, it would be incredibly potent. And then to your question on Clark County, if you had seen this presentation as well, they had an AI-generated document that showed what would it look like if the Grand Canyon existed between Portland and Multnomah County and Clark County. And for the purposes of recognizing the policy differences, you can go a few miles up the river, and what do you have? A really zero income taxed location. You have a place that is on an entirely different regulatory scheme than we are. There is not a bigger divide between two communities that share a single economy anywhere else. I mean, we've talked about maybe Cincinnati could be argued as having somewhat of a policy difference only because it's on the Ohio-Kentucky border, but there is no other place like this. As a ex-New Yorker, Jersey and New York are very similar, for better or for worse, in terms of their policy alignment. So we really struggle with that differentiation and about the differences that their policy value, tax value proposition presents to our community. And I think the notable slide that you can look at that is here is about when we saw the changes in the migration patterns of income. And it was to 2020, and what happened in 2020? We had the Supportive Housing Services measure, and we had the Preschool for All tax, which both were implemented within Multnomah County. SHS was regional, so it does include Clackamas County. And so I point that out because that's when you see patterns of migration starting to change. So to Brittany's point, the voting with your feet is becoming quite clear. And then also their land use policies are quite different, and that's why you see some affordability benefits as you go north of the river as well. That being said, I would say the one thing that we all share in common, it is extraordinarily impossible to afford to live in this community. And so I think if there is a singular uniting issue, a common denominator, it's two issues: taxes, right? How do we align taxes better and provide a better value for those taxes? And then secondly, how do we build? Because if we continue down this path right now, it doesn't matter if you can create as many jobs as you could possibly imagine. If you can't afford to live in the community to which you were employed in, we're all going to be in a challenged condition. I don't know if you would throw some more stuff on that.
Yeah,
lengthy explanation.
No, I think that was great. I think, Commissioner Schrader, to focus in on the voting with your feet piece and the Clark County piece, in that, yes, taxes, yes, schools, yes, a lot of other economic benefits, while still benefiting from living in the Portland metro region, still having access to PDX, still having access to the gorge and the coast, and the things that many of us moved here or stay here for, they can still benefit from, but just in a lower cost pocket of the region.
Anything else, Martha?
Nope, that's it.
Yeah. First of all, I saw the presentation as well, and I was very impressed. And I think first and foremost, I just want to say it says a lot about you, because it isn't glowing. And you're really taking a look at what the issues are. And I think that's really important for us to move forward, right? And my philosophy is, I'm very optimistic, and I think you kind of said it well. It really takes bold action. I think we have to act with some urgency. I've talked to John Isaacs, and we're doing strategic planning, and you're helping reinforce a lot of the things that I think we believe in. And, Kaiser's doing a new construction. We're really jazzed about that. What we can do as a board to follow up on those kinds of things that you're talking about, really. And I think a couple questions I have, and And I think it's really important for Clackamas County residents to see this information. That was another big reason why I wanted you to present on it. But I want you to talk just a little bit about the region and how, this is my belief, but I might be wrong, but things don't stop at the county lines. And we all impact each other. And in order to kind of have regional success, you know, it really is going to take us working together. I know Ben and I are both committed to SHS and coming up with solutions to kind of address that. But I know you talked a little bit about that and how it impacts. Maybe one of you could talk a little bit about kind of how, unfortunately, Multnomah County does impact all of us as a region, and how do you see that?
Yeah, do you want to start?
Just on the count, just give it a little bit more context to the question. So how does the region function as a singular economy? Is
Yeah,
the
I mean,
question?
it looks like from a lot of your data, you know, while some of the things we are kind of close on, and some things there's a further spread on it. But, for example, the jobs in Multnomah County, if people are leaving, right, a lot of the people also live in this county. They might go work in Portland, right? And from my perspective, that's one of the things I believe wholeheartedly is somehow we really have to come together as a region and kind of have some systems. I'm very excited, both of us are, about the new mayor in Portland and seeing some really positive things happening. But more or less just trying to get your input on regional impacts as far as the Tri-County area.
Go ahead. If you want to start, and then I'll.
Well, I think it's critical. I think it's what you described is sums it up well, in that we don't see these jurisdiction boundaries, and I think the region functions like a lot of regions, and the people live in one community and work in another. Although I will say, in some work we've done in Vancouver recently, we saw that for recent migrants into Vancouver, so people who have moved into Vancouver in the last year, more of them have jobs in the state of Washington than they ever have before. And so while prior to the pandemic, more of people living in Vancouver would travel into Oregon for work, that's declining. That said, there's too much work to be done and too much urgency to have disparate plans. And so the more coordination and alignment that we can support, I think the better, because all of these things are related. And so I think it's important what you're raising, and I'm really pleased to hear that you're pursuing that. What that looks like, we will see. But yeah.
And I would just add, dial out the aperture a little bit. And, you know, again, not born and raised here. Most people from around the world and the country don't necessarily know a ton about the Pacific Northwest, but what we don't even recognize is that we're actually it's not just the region. This is Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver, British Columbia. It is a singular economic entity. It is defined, statistically speaking, as a mega region. So everybody should just recognize first, we are linked and completely connected to the Puget Sound. And I mean that because you can walk here in Clackamas and go to Precision Cast Parts. That feeds into Gresham, where they have a Boeing facility that sends things up into the actual Boeing airfields up in the Puget Sound. So we literally are part of the aerospace community. This is connected both to the Department of Defense and major contracting work that puts our civilian and military air fleets and spaceships in the skies above us. So I think it's important to just point out we're way past just regional boundaries. This is a global epicenter. And a few things that are notable about it is, one, our businesses that really drive the economy here are very connected already. So whether you're a Boeing or whether you're an Amazon or whether you're Microsoft, not many people know this, they have huge presence in our region as well as in Vancouver, and I'm talking British Columbia and Seattle. So we are at the forefront of cutting-edge innovation technology. We're also a traded sector state. She's mentioned this a number of times. We literally depend on international trade, and we'll be facing massive headwinds. I mean, there just will be a huge moment of challenges when it comes to international trade that will have consequential impact to all of us. So the idea about whether or not you're Multnomah County, Clackamas, doesn't matter anymore. Like, we are under a unbelievable moment of change, and we either are going to run into it and embrace it together, united across the entire region, or we're going to fall victim to, you know, serious economic consequences that none of us want to contemplate. And then on the alignment, businesses really don't care. I have to say that. I think, just from my perspective, all they want to see is that there is at least a shared regulatory scheme, as painful as it may be sometimes to work across different governments. They want to see alignment. They also want to see a cultural alignment as well. And I don't mean that in purely like whether they're political this way or that way. They want to just purely know that, if you're someone like Keith Wilson, who ran a major trucking company that was an electrified, transportation company, in effect, a logistics enterprise, he wants to have a similar experience across Oregon, right? And that's the truth across the region as well. So to punctuate what Brittany's saying, it's like not only do you have to focus on getting alignment regulatory-wise across the 3 counties, culturally about being pro-growth. I think that's a huge call-out that we have to get over whatever our angst is about building and creating and supplying, housing units for people. I just think the more we can do that type of alignment work and then dial it up into the greater mega region that we're a part of, embrace that identity, the better for all of us.
So before I hand it over to one of my colleagues, just one last thing is, like, if you were to kind of boil this down to what you see to make this great change, I've heard you say a number of things, building jobs. I mean, could you kind of give me the top 4 or 5, I'll let you say from your research and experience what it's going to take to make those changes?
I'd say there's 2 things that I really believe in very strongly. They're just a today thing that I don't think is actually one of those. No one is disagreeing necessarily right now. Housing production. Okay, so if everyone can just be rowing in the direction of how do we create more housing in our region, that will allow our wages to go further, families to thrive, and employers want to be here because they know that their employees can afford to live here. And we just have huge headwinds about producing homes, not just single-family homes, multifamily dwellings, the whole thing. And this isn't just affordable publicly subsidized housing. This is just everything, no, luxury, I don't care what, just housing. If it has to be my grandma moving in with me, I'm happy with that too, ADUs, the whole 9 yards. We just need affordability, and that is built from building. So I think there's that piece of it. And then in the years ahead when we might be struggling, the only way through these moments are public-private partnerships. So whenever at all possible, and I say that not in a just flippant way, but I'm talking about whether it's baseball or what we're seeing at the airport, these are things that are really not just purely private sector led. It's about finding that soft spot between government and the private sector to allow for what might not be a highly investable moment in our community, where we're saying, hey, there might be some headwinds to the private sector and we know the public sector can't do it alone. So find those moments and seize them and just do everything to bring them to the priority, to the front of the line for whatever attention you need to do to deliver those sorts of projects. And I think that is the recipe whenever you're in a soft spot, economically speaking.
Yeah, I think 2 things come to mind for me. One is stepping in and leaning into that competition space and needing to compete for and celebrate every person who moves here and every job that moves here. And that's very different from the kind of space we've been in the past. And also through that celebration of ourselves is letting the country take notice. And Commissioner West mentioned this ULI study, and we are 80th out of 81 of regions around the country of where investment wants to go. And if national investment partners don't want to invest in our region, then we aren't getting out of this anytime soon. So needing to compete for that and maybe have a different stance on the come but don't stay, come and please stay. We need visitors too. And finally, in your full packet, you'll see there are a few examples of the virtuous cycle and what some other cities have done in recent years to come out of some of these challenges. And one that is really striking to me, which speaks to what Andrew was just saying, is to make the right thing easy. So make the right thing easy for businesses or residential developers, and look at those barriers and see what barriers you have jurisdiction over and leverage over to make that right thing easy. And so that can help define what your role is in regional economic development and in regional economic vitality, is to make that right thing easy.
Great, good point. Martha, you had your light on and off, and I want to call you first.
Yeah, I guess, again, what I'm really trying to understand is what is the difference between Clark County and Washington as our regionally, Washington Clackamas and Multnomah. So first of all, you said taxes were an issue, okay, no income tax. So is land availability a huge piece of it too? I would say that's one of the big issues we have in our county. And that in terms of larger traded sector industries that need large amounts of land, we haven't been able to come up with that. Is that true across the other counties? Or it looks like Washington County, in my estimation, for example, did a good job planning ahead to have plenty of land available for, like you said, the tech companies, the Intels, the Nikes. So could you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah,
in
Clark County
detail?
still has some pretty significant land constraints. They have site readiness constraints, much like the Oregon side of the metro does, in that shovel-ready land. While they have a different system in Washington, they still face similar constraints, and so we're looking at more redevelopment and infill opportunities, much like our region is. So it's not all that different.
So,
I would say the taxes are what are strikingly different.
okay, so it's the taxes that are really
More
kind of the
so.
crux of the matter. So how are we doing in terms of local businesses with the, I call it the retention, expansion, and recruitment? So what I'm hearing, the doom loop is we're not retaining and we're not allowing people to expand. What are there other tools in the toolkit that we are not using or could use in order to kind of break that loop? Because, again, most of our, I'm looking at Laura back there, most of the issue we have is actually just land availability, so we can look in that middle market kind of supply chain piece. But, so expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, so you may see our region at the top of lists for startup activity and entrepreneurship activity, and this is a really wonderful place to start a business. Where businesses come into more challenges is when they do try to scale. So to your point, Commissioner Schrader, it is challenging if they are looking for larger facilities, more talent, more capital. We don't have the capital that other cities do in our mega region, and up and down the West Coast. We do have constraints related to housing and land and talent. So that scaling piece is challenging. And in doing some work with the state Economic Development Agency with Business Oregon and talking to a lot of businesses all across the state and learning that they are getting phone calls weekly from other states trying to recruit them to another state, offering shovel-ready sites, offering incentives that Oregon simply can't compete with.
And just one other piece on that small business element, the city of Portland celebrated last year that it had opened up its first office of small business, and it would be a unique entity within, I think, the overall state of Oregon. And the job that the office has is a couple things. It's about, hey, you're a business and you're having difficulty navigating the intricacies of permitting or opening up a business. We've got someone that's a concierge that will help you through that moment. Or let's say you're trying to get a non-traditional line of credit, or you want your employees to have access to health care, things that might just be not the traditional, let's just call it a cupcake maker's expertise. They're there to make cupcakes, and this office is there to help them do that, but to really surround them with the tools they need or the technical providers that are traditionally available to folks. The fact that this is one of the first in the state to help out small businesses that's tailored specifically for that work isn't great. If you go to most other places, they celebrate their new businesses by saying, what do you need? Yeah. Who do we have to get out of the way to help you? And then the bigger issue, what I've heard a lot of, or this is something that there's no there at this moment. It's a great place to start business, but not to scale it. And I think we've got to get to the point where we welcome and we embrace. I think we have a very entrepreneurial spirit here in the region, but we don't have how do we grow that startup into the next Nike? Because why should we only be focused on that big shoe company, right? Let's make 1,000 new Nikes. Why do we have to be limited to just one? And we're not doing a good job of helping them scale, because what we're seeing a lot of, and there's really good information out there, I wish I had the citing of this report on hand, but the Oregon Entrepreneur Network pointed out that we are one of the top places to start a business, but we're also one of the best places to lose those businesses to other locations once they grow. So I think how do we keep them as they scale and help small businesses scale is going to be a big one, and every single county in this state is going to have to be aggressive about starting businesses, not just attracting them here, or not just creating big land or infrastructure. That's one tool in the kit. But entrepreneurism doesn't necessarily need a 400-acre site. It also needs
Right,
just.
it's so smaller, that's what we keep
Yep.
saying.
It's both and, so I'm not saying these are necessarily, we want both.
But the issue is, what you're saying, I think, is quite true, because we've done a lot of work with entrepreneurs and gotten things started here, not the least of which was the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition. You know, that was a famous thing we did. Well, Shelley Perini did most of it, but that's become now regional all the way up, you know, like I said, hyper-regional at this point. And yet we were able to incubate that here, but I would imagine that, again, a lot of these folks, once they get started, the smaller folks that get started in entrepreneur, then they're moving to other states too. We're not retaining them, right?
Correct.
So we're getting them started, they're kind of expanding, but then the retention piece seems to be missing because of why? Why is our retention so low when you?
Well, it's all of these conditions. It's the space, it's the talent, it's the housing affordability, it's other states.
Okay.
It's other states competing for those jobs and those companies more so than we are. So it's the other states reaching out proactively and offering packages.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's the opportunity. Is it the public or private sector that's doing that?
Public sector is reaching out.
Well, that's kind of what I was looking at Laura here too, because that was our experience. When you say we asked them what they needed, that's how this other manufacturing subgroup got started, because we were going around, hi, we're the government, we're here to help. What do you need? What's the barriers? How do you want to move this forward? What can we do? Here's our card. And it doesn't seem like, although I think we've done an absolutely fantastic job, it doesn't seem that that's been a regional model.
Definitely not. And then I would say that there is a current, Business Oregon has a legislated
Right,
fund for business attraction and retention, but it has never been funded. So I think that tells you all you probably need to know. They are currently considering whether to populate that, but it would be the example of, hey, we're hearing that you need help growing your business. I think what happened with Daimler North America is a textbook example about how a city can step up and say, great, we love that you're here right now. What they're producing on Swan Island is incredible.
Yeah.
And we should all be thrilled that we have Daimler in our community. But they were getting calls to expand in other locations, but the city and the state were able to step up and offer tools that were really outside of the current kit to be able to help them to expand. So I think that is a great example. Losing that investment would have been
devastating.
ridiculous.
So basically, it is that private. I think the key, what I'm hearing here, is private-public partnership. And for example, I've always felt that we have been far more friendly with a private-public partnership in this county, and I haven't seen that as dynamic or as robust up to the north, and that's largely because I also think part of the issue is we have a broader portfolio, which includes economic development and infrastructure. I think than some of our friends up north, which has largely been delegated to mostly social service delivery systems. But we have all of that. So it's also just not concentrating on one piece of the services or the things you're trying to provide. It's to be diverse in that, and including then that economic development component with those businesses in the process.
Commissioner, your comments couldn't be more timely. Yesterday, the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners voted to start their own economic. They don't have a game plan. What they're going to be doing is spending the next year with a funded initiative to create their own version of an economic development department.
Yes, that would be something that that's
And
why
I
we
think the
were-
lessons learned of your own work actually would be really nice to say, hey, let's not reinvent the wheels between the two counties, but let's actually take what Clackamas is doing and apply what's relevant to Multnomah County so that the two act in conjunction versus in their own siloed approach.
Well, yeah, they have been siloed. I
Yeah.
don't think, I think currently with the new commission, particularly with someone like Julia Bryn Edwards, you'll see that kind of piece move forward. But I was astounded when I first went to go out to businesses, and then I'll be quiet, that they were like, who are you and why are you here? And you're with what government? You know, that was the reaction. No, seriously.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything. So literally, I just heard jobs, jobs, jobs. And I thought, well, I don't know what that means. I'm a biologist. So, I know what I do. So we asked them, and that's when the catalytic the catalyst of that and recognizing, we visited every manufacturing plant that would let us in. We did all of that kind of downwork, and it's sad for me to see that. I hope our work isn't I worry that our work from that past is being dragged down right now by what's been happening in Portland, and if they change their attitude, as Ben alluded to, that might be a sea change, because business is good for people. It's not, business is not bad, and that's been a key component lacking. And also, I will say, though, that sometimes the private sector doesn't always trust us either as a public sector entity, because all they see is the big red R word. So there are those dynamics in terms of perception, I think, as well, of who's business friendly, who isn't, and who's willing to go the extra mile. So
Yeah, well, and I would just say your comments, I hope to bottle and
Yeah.
replicate across our region. That would be great. And, I would just share, don't ever take a new business opening for granted. As you know, when I moved here, we started handing out fake proclamations to businesses that would open in our community.
Yeah, we do,
they're
and,
real
and,
fake.
and Laura's
They're real
doing,
fake.
Laura's doing a great job,
Yeah,
because we were quiescent because of COVID, and now we're back to moving pretty aggressively ahead.
It makes so much when you just walk into a business opening and you say, I'm a commissioner, I'm the chair. We just want to say thank you and celebrate that you invested in our community. I can't tell you. It's like it's like having, for a business that opens, it's like having, I'm not going to say it's like having a kid, but I've had 3, and I can tell you it's a big deal. And not me personally had the child, my wife did. But I just point out it's a big deal, and it's worth celebrating.
The other thing we did quite well, they always had business summits too, so we would do it. We did a sectoral analysis of what our strengths were here, and we'd pull those sectors in. Dan, you remember all that work we were doing at the time. And I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen we're influenced by the North, but we still have the reputation, I think, as being business friendly, which has been helpful in all
I would
of
agree.
this. So, okay.
Commissioner West has a comment. And
Thank
we'll
you.
kind of move on here.
I mean, a lot of this is simple, like, I talk about this all the time, but it's the philosophical drivers. In Clackamas County, when I ran for commissioner, I was championing, we're open for business. We're open, get over here. You're gonna have a different experience. Hoffman Construction relocates. Because of what they were experiencing just to the north of us in a different county, they'll relocate for the safety of their employees. Being able to just get from the car to the office was a real struggle. The basics weren't being met. And so they moved to Lake Oswego. We had REI, could not exist in the beautiful Pearl District, which was supposed to be an upscale area, an upscale kind of outdoors restaurant. It fits the whole vibe and culture of the region. They move over here to Clackamas County. I have a number of stories like that. So I'd ask you this, like you said, I agree, like, there's not a lot of daylight between what I think this board thinks and what you guys are presenting. But you said it takes bold action. Like, we're at, doom loop sounds pretty dire, like, the car's going over the cliff, so that's, like, now. That's urgency. We haven't done a lot of great urgent moves in a lot of crises that we're facing here in Oregon still. I mean, we're not moving at lightning speed on any of them. But, we had the cat tax. That was brutal. Brutal. By the way, everybody, that's a sales tax that you all get to pay. Look it up. You just don't see it on your receipt, but it is a sales tax, and it's a big one. You had other measures like the absolute chronic failure of daycare for all. Now, Commissioner Schrader is a champion for daycare. We care about childcare, working with businesses. Businesses have kids too. They want good childcare for kids, and then government intervention comes along, and it's been a giant debacle, all full of like controversy, right? But that's just like the expense of the people you guys represent. And so you just look at this, like, I'm leading into my question. You look into like all of these like big policy initiatives with specific philosophies informing them. What bold policy initiatives are you seeing right now at the legislature or here in the Portland metro area to do real move the needle policy work to get us off the precipice because I've seen election cycle after election cycle, session after session of really what I would consider anti-growth, anti-business policies, and you can go all the way back to Senate Bill 100 in the 70s before I was even born. So we could even start since then. So I don't know if you could speak to that.
Yeah. So what I would say is a few things. There's two buckets, I'd say, livability and then economic development. On the livability front, at least in Portland, the way I view this, and by no means am I here to be defender of the experience in Portland. I have 3 children. We're a proud PPS family. We want to live and grow old in Portland and have our kids move back there once they've gone wherever they're going to go. But car thefts, national headlines, they're now back to 2014 levels.
Okay.
Homicides, violent crimes, and all other sort of generally bad things that happen in our community that are just unacceptable, down by 70% year on year from 2024 to 2023. The reform of Measure 110, broadly accepted and supported, maybe not perfectly. I'm not going to say that
We'll take it.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that anyone should walk and see that we've climbed the mountaintop on that issue at all. I still think that it's a tragedy beyond explanation. And so, but we are seeing reductions in overdoses in our central city and the related issues of admittance to the hospitals and how long people are staying there. So I think overall the livability improvements are dramatic year on year, so we're seeing that positive. Again, not where we would like it to be. On the economic front, I'd point back to that Advanced Portland plan. This is where I think there is opportunity to collaborate. So from that plan came, I think, things that I never thought I would have said out loud when I was hired into my job in 2018. Incentive for leasing office space in downtown Portland. Business license tax incentive to lease office space. First off, an incentive was at 1.84 letter word, and now it was passed unanimously by the city council. The expansion of the enterprise zone, so the ability to abate taxes to make capital investments, again, expanded in the central city last year. If that same tool had been brought in 2018, it would have been, I think, resoundingly defeated. Tax incremental finance, 6 new districts that were populated across the city of Portland last year. Those will come online, those resources to make investments in a few years. So I'm not saying that's immediate, but the fact that we got there with 6 new TIF districts, quite incredible.
Yeah.
There you
The
go.
one in the BioTwist in Wilsonville.
That's broadly a regional tool, and it's a great one, but the 6 that were enacted in the city were huge. We sent around to all of you, I just would point out what we call the 6-month action plan, right? And these were regional investments, largely looking to the legislative session. So I just want to be clear, it's not a Portland-only thing, but it's where we agree with the public sector about transformative things, like Major League Baseball, the Southwest Waterfront, like the OMSI redevelopment in the central city, like Broadway Corridor at Union Station, massive projects that will not only spur construction, but also create housing and economic vibrancy. So those are things the city's already investing in. They're at the table. They've actually created the partnership model, and what they need to do is stack capital from our state partners. So I think if you look at that 6-month, and I'll resend it to make sure Laura has it, so you have it. You will also find a number of Clackamas County-related matters on there as well, because we wanted to be a champion for things that were just clear and evident there. So I just want to point out, to us, it's about spurring the construction and building of public-private partnership-related projects, like Major League Baseball would be the obvious example of that. That's not just going to be a private sector. That's going to have to be everybody doing their part to make that come to reality.
So I think we're going to have to kind of move on. I'm
Yeah,
also
sorry.
kind of getting a signal for time.
Good question,
Dan,
so.
did you want to say anything before? Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
Real quick, thank you so much for the presentation today, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
You are seeing things that we are implementing currently.
Yes.
We're going to come to you here shortly. We're going to share with you a business engagement strategy to. Sorry, apologies. We'll be coming to the board here briefly and discussing a new business engagement strategy that we have that Laura's been working on. We've strategically realigned the different programs within the department, so now we have this visiting services component, which brings in our long-range planning, our urban renewal, our economic development, and our regional coordination under one umbrella. So they are all battling these topics in a unified manner and educating the discussion. You've seen the small grants program the Board of County Commissioners did last year for small business. That's been warmly received. We are doing things, and we are going to do more. And there's a discussion we're going to have with you. This information that they provided does educate a lot of the dialogue. And again, there are obstacles and there are issues and there are challenges that we have, and we echo a lot of the statements that they said: land availability, economic or restrictive land use policies, things of that nature, all things that we can dive in at the board's discretion. Yep.
And recognizing all the businesses.
Exactly.
So we did talk about that. So thank you both for your time coming here. We
Thank you very
really
much.
value it.
Pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Sure, thank you.
Commissioners.
Gary, what's up next?
Thank you, Chair. Your next policy session is surplus property disposition. Staff from Transportation and Development will present. Dan Johnson, Director, and Sarah Ekman, Assistant Director. Go ahead. You can stay there, yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to stay over in this odd side spot. Apologies. We are here to have a discussion with you about identifying property as surplus. In short, annually, assessment and taxation forecloses on real property in accordance with Oregon revised statutes for non-payment of property taxes over a period of about 6 years. At such time, the property foreclosure is complete and the property is deeded to the county. That's where the work of the property disposition program comes into place. Essentially, their role is to get that property out of county ownership and back on the tax rolls as quickly as possible. In order for us to complete that task, we have to sell or trade property, and the property must be deemed as surplus by this entity, by the county. So essentially, we have a list of, I think, 21 properties in total. And essentially, by authorizing staff to advance this declaration for the list of properties that are attached, one will recover owed tax revenue and county costs through the sale. It'll comply with state legislation that's currently in place and/or looking to be adjusted. And last but not least, it'll reduce and eliminate our risks with property ownership. Once our properties are declared surplus, the sale of the properties would be facilitated through a future public sale via a sheriff's auction. The auction will be scheduled in coordination with the sheriff's office and conducted in accordance with ORS standards. The packet has a lot of additional information regarding sales methods. It has information regarding a recent court case. Just to cut to the chase, around a lot of materials in there. Essentially, the viability to sell these properties gets them back on the tax rolls, reduces our liability, allows us to create, and we have accounting practices in place to ensure that if there is a claim made against any of these properties, that there's finances that we've collected them, they can be disposed of properly. But essentially, is a strategic effort to reduce our risk in the long run. So we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions there, Mr.
Actually,
West?
technically, you don't have a quorum. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. You've lost your quorum,
You just stepped out first.
so we have to pause until the
So we
commissioner's back.
recess until she comes
We have to
back.
take a short break. Yeah, sorry about that. Short break, please.
We'll take a So welcome back to the afternoon session on April 8th, 2025, and continuing our discussion on surplus property.
Thank you so much. Just to recap, essentially authorizing staff to advance this sale as the property's back to the tax rolls. We're able to recoup foregone taxes, we're able to recoup county costs and reduce our liability going forward. We do this auction in concert with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. There's a lot of material, there's a lot of additional material in here. A lot of it's regarding recent Supreme Court cases and things of that nature. I can affirm to the board that we have financial systems in place to ensure we are tracking every dollar associated with every property. So if and when there is a claim that is made for additional surplus funds, we're able to respond to those. With that, I'd be happy to answer your questions you might have.
Any questions?
Nope.
Hearing none, do I have a motion by anybody?
Yes, hold on. It's on. Give me a second, and unless Martha, you want to make the motion. I don't have it directly in front of me, but I can in a second.
Trying to find it.
There are,
I think
Okay,
it,
so I can make one?
yes, you
Okay,
may go
Great,
ahead.
okay. I would like to move to direct staff to bring the attached list of tax foreclosed parcels to a future business meeting for declaration of surplus property. Is that the right one?
Yes.
All right.
And is there a second?
I guess I'll second it.
Thank you very much. So Schrader's has a move to direct staff to bring an attachment list of the tax for closed for parcels to the future business meeting for declaration surplus property, seconded by Commissioner West. Any further discussion? Clerk, would you please call the poll?
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. This now concludes our policy session for this day on the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you all for joining us. Hearing no objections, we're adjourned.